Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
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 What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to have on today's show two dear friends who are going to take us down a testimonial rabbit hole of epic proportions. Introducing child sexual abuse and sex industry survivor, mother, wife, multidimensional transformational storyteller, former gifted student, metaphysical practitioner and trauma recovery expert, intuitive healer, spiritual counselor, transformative life coach, and absolute inspiration, Lynn Navi, and addiction survivor and targeted individual, selfless servant of the Most High, father, subcontractor by trade, gifted musician, active participant in the recovery community, deal breaker with the devil, passionate pursuer of truth, and a man on a mission to help set the captives free, Daniel Forsythe. Katie and Daniel met in May of 2016 after they were both sent to a residential treatment facility called Sovereign Health in Palm Desert. The organization was touted to serve adults with mental health and substance abuse problems. At that time, Daniel was broke, uninsured, and desired to seek help to get sober. One day, he received a phone call requesting to interview him to see if he would be a good candidate for the quote-unquote program. When he took the call, Daniel was informed that an anonymous benefactor was on the call that wished to listen in, but did not want to be identified throughout the interview. After Daniel's interview, he was informed that the foundation wanted to pay for his treatment and they offered to fly him from Wyoming to Palm Desert. Daniel arrived at Sovereign just before Katie, who had been hospitalized for over a month in Santa Barbara in a special wing for psychiatric patients where she received what felt like celebrity treatment, as well as having to undergo many questionable tests, such as assessing her layered personality systems and asking her to define Masonic code words. Katie was informed that she was not allowed to leave the facility until they were able to find her a residential treatment program. Katie wanted to do an outpatient program and even offered to put herself in sober living. However, she was told the only place she was allowed to go was Sovereign Health and that she would remain in the hospital until they were able to arrange her transport. Despite the 5-star hospitality at the hospital, she was eager to get on with her life, so she reluctantly accepted this determination. It didn't take long for Daniel and Katie to realize that Sovereign Health functioned outside of the lines of a typical residential treatment program. Beneath the celebrity rehab appearance were some very questionable motives. When the residents came together, it became apparent that they all shared some very distinct patterns. Everyone that was chosen was gifted and talented. It started to feel like it was possible that Katie and Daniel were not just there to recover their own lives, but that they were being used for a purpose that was understated by the program itself. On the first day they were gathered together at the center, they were told that they would be deprogrammed and reprogrammed, affirming some of their assumptions that they were amongst descendants of MKUltra and other clandestine operations. In 2017, the FBI raided Sovereign Health with a sealed warrant. In addition to the FBI raiding the Palm Desert campus, San Juan Capistrano officials also searched a private residence along Silverleaf Drive, the same street where Sovereign Health CEO Ton Moy, sorry you guys, I'm butchering this name, Sharma lives. And it's here where we are coming together today to draw our conclusions on what was actually happening at Sovereign Health with two brave whistleblowers here to share everything they know and have experienced. Before I finish introducing today's amazing guests, I wanted to give a couple reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest or share any information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also use this email if you'd like to be a part of my new book series featuring written survivor testimonies, and you can find the video with all the details on how to submit your testimony on any of my podcast channels. And lastly, I'd love your support on my Substack, where I've taken up investigative journalism as an outlet for me to share about my podcast, the guests, and advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All my links are in the show notes, you guys, and I love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for caring so deeply about survivors and whistleblowers and for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guests of honor, survivors, whistleblowers, spiritual warriors, revolution starters, and two dear friends and conscious parents on a mission to create a bridge for healing themselves and others. The ones, the only, Katie Lynn Navi and Daniel Forsythe. Katie, Daniel, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, thanks for having us, Emma.
You are
Yes, thank you.
And for people listening, Katie is a returning guest. She had an incredible testimony on the podcast, so I'm going to have that linked below. We will be sharing part of their testimony today, but this is actually some information that we didn't talk about on Katie's first episode. At least we didn't go in depth. And I'm really excited to have both of you here today. So I thought we would start. You guys have known each other for a while and lost touch. And I wanted to share the synchronicity and sort of manifestation that brought you guys back together because I think it's really special. And it goes along with the first episode that you were on, Katie, where we spoke about some of the things that led both of you together. So I thought we'd kick it off and share how you guys rekindled your relationship.
Okay. Well, so I did that gate post and I didn't expect, like I said last time, I did not expect it to take, because I don't usually get a lot of attention on social media, or at least I hadn't before. And that thing went viral. And then Daniel found me from the gate post on TikTok, and he was like, I just recognized your voice, because I don't look like the same person. I'm like, I'm definitely a little bit different than I was back then. And he recognized my voice though, and that's how he like heard me, because it was a weird video too. I was like black and white, and wasn't wearing makeup. So the fact that you found me out of 8 billion or 80, I don't know how many billion people are on TikTok, and identified me by my voice, that was pretty cool.
Want to add
Yes.
anything to that, Daniel? Like, what was it for you? Were you just scrolling, or like, where did it come
Yeah,
up?
I was yeah, I was just scrolling, and then I mean I wasn't even, I was haphazardly scrolling, I was just kind of flipping through, and I heard the voice because I had my Bluetooth in my ears, I was listening that way, and I just heard her voice, and it just sounded like it was captivating immediately. It almost like triggered something in my brain, but it must have been that remembrance though. And I looked and I was like, is that Katie? And once I saw it, I was like, no way, because I was looking like, well, in my mind, I was wondering about you, Katie, and I hadn't heard from you in so long, and I don't go on Facebook or anything, I don't really go, and all my stuff is turned off as far as like when how your social media will ask if you want to like sync it with your contacts. I never do that, I always have all those things off. So I thought it was really just a God thing that she appeared magically on, right in front. So I messaged her right away, and I was just like, yeah, it was really cool. So I'm grateful, super
I think
grateful.
it's I think it's interesting too, because that's how
Yeah.
I met Katie, was through the Gate Post. So in a weird way, the Gifted and Talented programs brought us all together.
Yeah, if you know anything about like algorithms and law of attraction and like attracts like, I love this because it's like pretty safe to say all of our theories are not so far off, because we're all like synced up somehow without us even sharing a theory. We're just out there being us, being our natural organic selves, and we're finding each other.
100.
Yes.
So it's really cool.
It's really cool. And I love too that, something from childhood, like say Gifted and Talented, for example, it's connected like so many people putting this information out and just asking
Yeah.
questions, not even like necessarily sharing your own testimony, just
Yeah.
asking people like, what was your experience? Like how we talked about last time, Katie, the power of testimony and realizing like how sharing that is like genuinely how we all connect. And like we never talk about that in our regular life. We never share like who we really are. We always put on masks and, you know, labels, and we go out and we, you know, we have a job, we come home and we have to be mom or dad or whatever it is, you know. And it's nice to sometimes just take all that off and just genuinely talk to people about like who we actually are and like things that we experienced, you know, and then to come together about it and be like, you too? Oh my gosh, like I thought I was alone, you know? So
Yeah.
I love that
Abs-
conversations too are like, you know, building communities, just like being authentic, like you said, Katie.
Yeah.
And so I'm super excited to have you both here today. So you both rekindled a relationship, but this is actually a relationship that dates back a lot further back than when you guys just reconnected over this GATE program post that Katie made. So I thought we'd start the story. We have a lot to dig into today, and I think the story is going to be incredibly impactful for people who have gone through really hard times, who have hit rock
Yeah.
bottom, who have had to ask for help. Those can be really vulnerable times in people's lives. And that's also something we don't talk about enough, is that like that's a really it takes courage to ask for help and to like reach out. And sometimes like
Yeah.
how what happened to you guys, like you meet, you know, these beautiful people in your life that you can go through these hard times with and come out on the other side, you know, and heal together. So it's almost like a roller coaster that you get to go on with a friend, you know, in a way, if
Yeah.
you're willing to ask for help and like seek it. So you both met in a residential treatment facility, and I'd love for you both to share, before that moment that you guys met, I'd love to just talk about what was going on in your life at that time and how you ended up either reaching out for help or being sent to this facility, just to give people a little bit of background on how you got there. So, Katie, would you want to start and share that part of your life before you ended up
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I'm gonna condense this down as probably hopefully as best I can. I had a crazy 9 months that preceded me going into my first 5150 experience. Um I was like working in a unconventional way at the time. I had quit my job in healthcare and had this like crazy personality take over where I was like, I need to go on this mission. And I quit doing everything that was normal in my life. Started using drugs like at 30 years old. I was like using controlled substances. And then I just like kind of developed this alternate persona all like in a very short period of time. It was right after the blood moon of 2015. And during that time I like felt this like strong compulsion to start like going into the things that were taboo. You know, like I needed to go and understand like something about myself or something about others. So I started like doing angel oracle readings online for random people, and I started attracting, you know, an interesting type of person, you know, as one would on Craigslist. And I noticed that like my intuitive gifts were spiking when somebody would just email me. I would like see their email and just feel their energy, and like I knew everything about these people when I would see an email, and they didn't have to say even hardly anything. So it was weird. I would respond back and like tell them all the things about their lives. And I started to kind of, you know, I don't know if I started putting myself on the radar at that time because I was just kind of like willy-nillying on the internet. And then I started going deeper into rabbit holes. So I went on Craigslist, found an ad. I think I told this story last time. I became a webcam model. Um, didn't really know what I was getting into at the time, and I just thought like, okay, cool, like I can do this thing from home and doesn't even have to be pervy. I can like I thought I could run like my own talk show and treat webcam sites like they were social media sites and like do my own thing. And I ended up just going deeper and deeper and deeper into like more demoralizing behavior. Um I got recruited to recruit women into this world, and while I was there I started realizing this is not what it was sold to me to be. It was like a little bit more nefarious, but I was also not an angel. Even though I was working for the Angel Girl Studios, I was teaching women how to become financial dominatrix on the web. And so I was like teaching a set of like psychological manipulation skills, essentially, in the name of empowerment. And I was kind of working through a lot of my own trauma at the time. I was working through a lot of like regression to things that had happened in my life prior. And I had split myself from the life that I really was on the outside. Like, you know how everybody has a public life and a personal life, and then there's the secret life they talk about. I had a secret life, and my secret life was that I was this in this underworld of, you know, it was like it wasn't exactly sex work, it was like reconnaissance. I was meeting with all these people online, getting all their information. They would share all these personal details with me. And then I just started going deeper and deeper and deeper into darker things like meeting people, flying places, getting my ass kicked by sadists. Like it was all very heavy and dark. And at the time, I thought that I was like kind of under some sort of like belief that I needed to do what I was doing. Um, I think last time we spoke, I talked about how I was like in this hotel room and taking like all this crazy abuse, and I allowed it. Like I wanted to like I didn't wanted to pass the test. I know it sounds a little crazy, but like in my mind, I thought I was doing like initiations and things that I was supposed to do. And like, I also thought I was like a spy, which is kinda it sounds crazy, but, like, I felt like I was on a mission and there was, like, this light work aspect of it that was in my head where I was like, I'm transmuting all this darkness in all these people, and I'm meeting all these creepy pedophiles, and I'm giving them a safe outlet to let their fantasies be discussed. And, you know, like in my mind, I thought I was doing something good, but I also knew that like I was involved in some really nefarious stuff. And so at some point, I started picking up attention when I was on these other websites like Miss Travel and there's just like a gaggle of things you can get into when you're in that world. And this guy reached out to me who is like an IT executive, and he became like a handler, and he would communicate with me on like an app that was no longer available in the United States, but it's like a military grade app, end-to-end encrypted. And he would give me like instructions and like from a distance and tell me like to do certain things, like he was training me. And it was also intuiting this at the time, trying to figure out what his real motive was, because I could always figure out like some people were real clients, like John's, and then other people were like feds that were there kind of like grooming you and monitoring you in these worlds. And so I was a little bit like tapped into all of it at the same time, and part of me was like okay with it. Like I was going for it. Like I knew what was happening, but I also like didn't know. Like I was like a yes, is it happening? Is it not happening? Am I really like being groomed right now in the BDSM arena, or am I choosing all this for myself? I had a lot of confusion at the time. Part of it was substance abuse, and then me trying to unpack and integrate my own childhood trauma by talking to all these like weirdos that had sexual deviant tendencies. Um, so I was in this weird world where I was totally exposed, and I was also aware of the fact of how much exposure I had and information I had been carrying because of all the different types of people I met. And I also knew about MK Ultra at the time. And that I told him the last time how I went down that rabbit hole was a lot of patients in my life were telling me stories that led me to that info. So as I was integrating all this information, I started channeling at the time. Everything was like a swirl. I started channeling all these poems, like really cryptic, and I didn't know what I was talking about, but for some reason somebody did, because I attracted the interest of all these other interested people, like IT executives. I don't know what it was about me and IT executives, but I seemed to attract them. Like that was my algorithm. And I thought that was weird too. I'm like a pattern recognizer. So I'm like, why are all these IT guys into me? Like, I'm a 30-something-year-old. I'm too old for the sugar baby game, really. Like, I don't belong here. So people either knew I was some kind of like op of some doing something, and they were working with me, or they were grooming me for something, or like I just happened to just my MO is IT guys. I don't know. Like like I didn't know what was happening at the time, but these people were in my life. They were very encouraging. These men, um they would encourage me to write. They liked to receive my poems and my stories and my thoughts, my ideas. Like I had a lot of creative bursts at this time because I was very disassociated, and I was on drugs. So like that combination of trauma, disassociation, and substance abuse made me very open. And I was just channeling a ton of writings, like tons of poems. And I would send them to these men that were like, I called them my life father team. That's how I referred to them, because there were multiple, and weren't people I didn't necessarily have physical interactions with all of them. Some I did, um, but they would like, it felt like they were all just really interested in cultivating me in some way. Someone was a psychologist, and he told me his job was to help work with family members of like people who own like corporations and like billionaires or whatever. And he said like he helped work with their children when they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. That was like what he told me. I was like, and the little part of me is like, why are you bothering wasting your time talking to me? You know, like I'm just some random girl on the Central Coast. And, but this happened so much that I was starting to get paranoid. I'm like, why are all these high level people interested in little old drug addict me over here? You know, like my mind was not, something wasn't computing. So I felt like I was playing this game, like this cat and mouse game, talking to the guys on the app and then doing the little like, here's my poems. And then I was also like trying to work out who I am at the same time. Like, who am I? What am I doing? I was multiple people. I literally went by different names at a different time. Like I was channeling under different names. Um, and then one day I'm in my house having a moment where I'm thinking about something, and I look it up online, and as I'm reading the words, it was like everything in my consciousness just shifted, and I saw binary code, and I started to feel like my crown had opened, and I was like getting flashes of pictures, and I saw documents and things that I had no prior knowledge of, like CIA documents were flashing in my head. And I had just like an awareness, like a sudden awareness of a lot of things, that like all the people in my life that were my life father team, and feeling like maybe I was the last to find out that everyone was somehow like connected to one another, and it wasn't like all random. And so like a lot of my life just felt like it was having like I was having an existential crisis or a psychotic break at that moment. And I called my dad when I woke up in this trance, trying to like do these weird things to my computer. I had mentioned last time I was trying to um, uninstall software and drivers, and I don't even know how to do that today. Like if you asked me, I may know, but this version of me doesn't. And but I was doing all this weird stuff, and then I told my dad like I need 12 drivers to replace my or to complete my programming. And he came over and he took me to the hospital at that point, because after I had mentioned to him, I thought I was a computer. Like I said, I think I'm a computer. Because everything that was in my brain and the way that my visual field went black and I saw binary code, I thought this is all simulation and I'm just a computer storing information. And I told my dad all of this stuff, and I was like explaining to him, I think I'm part of MK Ultra. And I started just going on and on about different things, like about the watchers and about the wires. And I was telling him like all these details of technology that I have no concept for, haven't been brought to the light. trying to explain these complex things. And my father's like, we need to go to the hospital, because he knew I was sick. I was, you know, at that time, not sober. So he was like, maybe we need to go to the hospital and get you sober, checked out. And when I got to the hospital, though, I felt super clear. Like everything felt so clear after that moment of crown opening. I was like, this is it. Everything makes sense now. I've been MK Ultra'd. Like, I just started feeling like that was my storyline because of what was happening to me. So, of course, you go in there and you tell people that you've been MK Ultra'd, and they're like, we need to 5150 you immediately. They took me into a separate room, took all my clothes, put a security guard in front of the door. Um, and then transferred me to Santa Barbara to another hospital. That was the first hospital was in Santa Maria. Then they took me to Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital, where I was admitted to this really awesome, like it felt like I was a different dimension. I say it was like the fifth dimension over there, because I was in a part of a psychiatric unit there where they treated you like a celebrity. Um, I was given like 5-star meals, and they had like a violinist come in and play classical music. We had a yoga instructor. We had like activities. It was all locked up. Like we were in a locked up place where nobody could get in that wing. But it was kind of like a little timeout. It felt like a timeout from this reality. And then while I was there, I had a lot of it felt like the staff was really scared of me, which was weird to observe. Like they came up to me, this one woman who's like a social worker or in charge of all the social workers, gave me a contract. And she was like, gave me a contract and told me that I can't do certain behaviors. And I had not done anything inappropriate at all in any of my hospital experiences. And because of my history of what I was doing, I guess, prior to my admission, being a FinDom trainer, they thought that I was going to like do stuff to people in the hospital or like turn my gifts on my gifts turn my gifts on to others in the hospital, and they presented me with this big contract saying like I will not act a certain way, dress a certain way, speak to people a certain way. I was like, what the heck? I was so scared. I was like, what do you mean? Like, you think I'm going to do something like that in a situation like this? And so felt like I was being slut shamed at the hospital. And then I didn't know really what I was or who I was and what I was capable of at that time. And then so I didn't tell you this part of the story yet, but I was there for about 2 weeks. Then they discharged me to their place called CRC, which was a residential that's attached to the hospital. I went there for like maybe 10 days and I got kicked out because they were giving us all these schema tests. And yeah, so my German guy who's like the handler that I, talked to on the app, he said to me right before I had to take this schema test, you'll know who you are very shortly. And then I go in and I'm like thinking he's remote viewing me or something because I'm like, how would you know what I'm doing? And then he says this, and then I go in, I take this weird schema test, and the acronym for my maladaptive whatever score was BDM. So my brain got triggered like by just seeing those letters BDM. I was like, I'm a masochist. And I screamed that out loud in the whole group. And I went back to my room crying, and I told this German dude who, was like my BDSM instructor. I was like, how did you know this was going to happen? How did you know this was going to happen? And at that point, my paranoia was like at an 11, and I thought they're all watching me. Everybody knows what's going on. Then they asked me to take another test, and it was like to determine your likelihood of relapse. It was all these weird psychological questions, and mine, I had like the lowest percentage of relapse, and my only factors were social pressure. And I was like, that's weird. Like I don't have any. And I told him, so I slipped a little note in the table and I said, I think is according to this test, my factors are social pressure. Can you guys help me out with that? Next thing I know, I'm being called into the office with like the main director of this facility, and he tells me like he gets all my poetry because I told him I don't know how to explain what I know, but just read my poems and it'll tell you everything you need to know about me. And the director there is like, after he's read my poems, he's like holding them and he goes, "This is shaman. You need to learn how to control yourself." And I was like, "What? What does that mean?" Like, I didn't even know what that meant at the time because I was not exposed to all the spiritual stuff. And I was just like, what do you mean I need to control myself? It took me a little time to like realize in hindsight, I had been channeling coded information that was like actual, some of the stuff was like stuff that I shouldn't be talking about, but I was passing like intel or comms through my poetry. Um, and so I didn't know that. And I was like giving away, like, here's what I wrote. Here you go, daddy. Like, check this out. And not my actual dad. Sorry, dad. Wasn't you, but the daddies, the other daddies. And if you're watching, dad, you know. So, but anyway, so that happened. And then I'm gonna try to switch it up here. Then they sent me back to Cottage Hospital. I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't a medical threat, but they decided to send me back to Cottage Hospital because they didn't know what to do with me. I was upsetting the whole group at CRC. And so they they told me I was triggering the whole group and I needed to go. So they sent me to the hospital again and kept me there for 3 weeks this time at the hospital. And there was no physical reason why I needed to be physically locked up for 3 weeks, but while I was there, they were doing a lot of like weird tests. Like I had two USC researchers came in and they wanted to meet with me and interview me, and I was like, oh, here we go. So all this is substantiating my MK Ultra delusion that I'm having, which, I'm like thinking, if this is a delusion of grandeur, then this is not helping, guys. Like, so I get these MK Ultra researchers or whatever, like USC. They come in and they start asking me trigger questions, like code words that only you would know if you know things. And so some of the words they would say to me were like, "What is Daisy?" And they say like, they tell me to what's Daisy. And then I would just start spitting out like what Daisy meant. And it was like somehow my brain was like a computer and it was just like just rolling off. Like I felt kind of like like when you see like someone that's like a soldier and they're like asked to like stand about face and they're like, "Sir, da 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 da," and they say their thing. That's like what happened when they said certain words to me. I was like, "Daisy is," and and then they asked me like, "What is blue?" And I was like, "Blue, Blue Lodge, da 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 da," and I just kept going into like pure, immortal, like da da da, and like told them as if I was rehearsing something that I was supposed to say. And they just were like, "All right," took some notes, and then they left. Like, and they weren't very nice either. I remember I felt like there was this one girl, she looked at me like with this stink face. And I was like, "Why are you judging me? We didn't even know each other." Like, so, but that happened. And then it felt like the people that were in the hospital with me too weren't all patients. And Daniel, you might want to chime in on this when it's your turn, because you and I both have agreed on this. Like, it felt like there were some feds in there that were pretending to be patients because, as an intuitive empath and as somebody who has, often known and thought the like most bizarre things and they've actually been true, this was really like heightened when I was in the hospital. I could tell that some of the people that were in there that were as patients were not actual patients because they would all say weird things, like it was like they were giving me messages or something. And of course, for the viewer here, this all sounds schizophrenic and bipolar and everything else that you get to a hospital for these days. So we're just going to call it what it is. I sound crazy, but this is what was happening in my brain at the time I was having these experiences as well. Um, So I got there, and I'm probably going to gloss over a little bit. And if I do, you can circle back with me later if you guys remember. But finally, my parents were like, we don't know what's going on. They won't let us be involved in like your discharge plans. And I was like, they told me that I'm not allowed to go anywhere until they can find me a residential treatment place, because um they said that like I'm not allowed to leave the hospital until they find one. And my mom and dad were like, okay, sounds okay. And then they were trying to advocate for me to go to this Christian one that was in Santa Barbara, and the caseworker was like, Katie's not a Bethel girl. Like that's all she said to my parents. She was like, Katie's not a Bethel girl. And because the Bethel girls are the good girls. So yeah. And so then I was like told, a family member called for me and they left a phone number on my hospital table. And I go and call it back, and it's not a family member. It's some lady who's acting as like an intermediary between my insurance company and the hospital. And she's like, we can get you into this place, like Sovereign. And I was like, cool. And I'm just like listening to all this, like, I don't have a choice. They told me this is the only place you can go. Even though I had great insurance, I could have gone anywhere actually. But for some reason, you know, when you're in that system, once you're in the hospital, like they kind of own you. You don't really get to call your own shots, especially if you get 5150'd. It's like you're no longer an autonomous person that can make your own decisions. So I just went with it and I was like, sure, okay. And they said you're going to go to Sovereign in Palm Desert, because they had multiple locations. They had like one in Culver City and one in San Clemente. And they said the one you're going to is in Palm Desert, and we'll let you leave the hospital when we have a transport arranged for you to leave. And I was like, what? Like, I'm thinking, like, am I in jail? Like, am I bad? Like, I all this stuff in my head. I'm thinking, like, but I'm physically stable. I'm medicated. Why am I still like being locked up here? So anyways, I got down there, and then the rest is, I'm gonna throw this one at Daniel. Then I met Daniel.
Thank you for sharing. Wow. I think it's, like I was telling you before we started recording, and this is for both of you, it's amazing to me hearing where you guys were and then seeing where you're at right now and just like listening. I'm just like, it's so hard to picture you being that version of Katie because you're so far from there now. You can tell that all the spiritual stuff is like what drove you to be where you're at, and like you held on to all of that. But you see, like, what led you to that moment, and these moments in your life, and it's like, wow, like it's amazing what healing can do, whenever you devote yourself to it and whenever you take that time to like find out who you are.
Yeah.
So I just want to give a testament to you. Like, it's incredible. Your testimony is just incredible, Katie. You're an absolutely beautiful person. You're so inspirational. And, I love that we can all learn from your experiences now, in hindsight, and, that you can educate people and help victims and help people on the outside, have empathy and compassion for people who go through this and realize that, a lot of people that get into these sex work, webcam, whatever it is, like a lot of them are traumatized, and sort of falling back
Mhm.
into these trauma bonding habits or trauma habits. So thank you so much for sharing that. And then Daniel, let's talk about what was going on in your life before you met Katie and Sovereign and started that journey. Let's talk about your life.
Okay. Well, I was it kind of all I'm gonna put a bunch of information all together and try to condense it the best that I can as well. But because it all goes in together. So, you know, around 2012, I would say I ended up 2012. I got sentenced to prison. I ended up going to prison, and I was I was on a search to find God at that point, and I believed in God. I did, and in Jesus, and anything I was doing a bunch of research that led me to some different information. Some people handed me there, and that opened a bunch of doorways in my mind, basically, and I ran down every rabbit hole that I could really, get into. And I started, it just took like, it took the belief that I had in God, and it almost completely annihilated it, the information that I had. But it was like I was being led down a different path. So the path that I went down, it was definitely the dark side, but it was looked at as, as the light, as the real light, and that, we were deceived and, all this stuff. And I kind of, gave right into it. And when I came out of prison, I had this whole, I started like, I was manifesting things into my life, and I was, putting some of these things into practice, and they were working, but I had distanced myself from the connection I had with God, and I ended up falling back into using pills, using drugs. And the more and more I was doing that, at the time, I was doing a lot of different research and on different things, and I was posting things I probably shouldn't online, information about stuff that I was looking into about, the Council on Foreign Relations and just like the Trilateral Commission and all of those different things, and at the same time, I was trying to numb, because I'm super empath too. Like, I feel everybody's everything, including my own. And like, that's the whole reason that I went to using, was because I couldn't control the pain that I felt. I woke up every morning and had this, like, felt like, someone had died, or like, I don't know what it was. It was just so much, though. It was so heavy. And everyone else seemed to be like, functioning, going to work, being okay. And I'm like, you guys don't feel this? Like, I have this horrible anxiety and all this stuff. So I was trying to like numb that down. And I'd found, just a perfect amount of whatever chemicals, do whatever I could to keep that down, and like, so throughout that period, I was like, I was using, then not using, then using, kind of back and forth, trying to like get into a place to where I could be, you know, I guess I was trying to use and be functioning, which is never, it never works. You know what I mean? I couldn't find that medium, and I kind of, ended up, it's kind of a long story, and I'll try to jump through it. But basically, I found out that I was being watched, and I truly was being watched, and I had a friend who came back from New Mexico. I lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico at one point in time. And this guy, he got himself caught up in a lot of trouble. And I don't know which side of which things were on, but basically I was being watched. And I ended up going to New Mexico. And I found out, because I was trying to learn computer code and all this different stuff, kind of looking on my phone, looking, on my computer, and kind of noticing like my battery dying quickly. All this stuff was going on. Screens were popping up on my computer, things that like I wasn't doing. So I started looking into it and was learning how to read, computer code, where apps and what's using what and how much power, and this is going here, going there. And I found public ID dash cams of vehicles that had followed me all the way from Wyoming, where I'm at, down to New Mexico. And I had gotten into, when I was doing this was like a day after I was only there for 12 days, and I was in an accident, but it was a trunk operation. So like, there was a cop in front of me. I had a green light, cop turns, I turn, and this car comes out of nowhere, smashes into me, totals my car. And the first thing that happens is the cop comes running up to my door and goes, "Where's your insurance?" And I'm like, dust is like settling, and my girlfriend at the time is like pinched in between the door and the seat. They had to use the jaws of life to cut her out. And this cop is like, all he wanted to know was my insurance information, and he wouldn't let me get out to see who had hit me or anything. Like, I was like I'm like, I need to get their information. They're like, you don't need to do anything but sit on the curb, all this stuff. And it was like, it was really, really crazy, like how it happened. And they were like right on me. But in New Mexico, if you don't have insurance, they can arrest you. And that day, my insurance was expired. I didn't have insurance. And so I just got it that day, though. That morning, I had just gotten it before I got in that accident. So praise God. But there was other things at work and at play during that time. And like, I look back, and because it sounds like, I was high, I was crazy, people weren't following me, all this stuff, like, I was going down rabbit holes and all the types of things you would think, but it's like, there was definitely, I realized that I don't know if I was being, I don't know, I guess groomed in some way, because later on this whole happened, like ended up coming down to a deal, being offered a deal with the devil. And it all led back to me being in prison, being handed different information, and being kind of like led down this thing is like away from God, basically. And all these different things that I was researching, looking into, all these dots started connecting, and all as these dots started connecting, and that was all I was trying to process and integrate all this information at the time. And like after that, after all that happened in the accident, the information I found on my computer and like all this stuff, I was tripping. I mean, I was like tripping out because I was like, I have the proof. This is here right there. Like my phone ended up getting, my phone was so hit, I couldn't even call anybody or any of the people I had in New Mexico to come get me, because I had a friend that I told him and he knew what was going on to an extent. And I was like, and he had some people looking into it that were in Army's, counter intelligence and whatever. And he just calls me and he goes, "What did you do, bro? Like, what did you do?" He's like, "I got a van following me. I got different vehicles following me." And the same person that was following me here in Wyoming, this man that I had gotten taken a picture of, I caught him doing it, went up to his vehicle. And I mean, I was sober at this time when that had happened. And then I was back in New Mexico. It was the same guy. I was with my friend. We ended up pulling right in front of his car, slamming on the brakes at like 50 miles an hour and like stopping. And I got out and I took pictures of him. And I'm like, this is the guy I was, showing pictures. And it was just crazy. So I was like super in disbelief about all this happening. And I was just trying to get out of there. Like I went down there for a certain purpose and, to go to basically work, but the work that I was doing wasn't legal, but I never ended up doing the job anyway. But God had other plans for me, which by the grace of God, I made it out of there alive, because I was stuck in like this hotel room. And I mean, there's a whole nother story about, there was like a fake taxi cab driver company who I had called because we were in a wreck, and we had to go to Walgreens in the morning, and I was trying to make a phone call, and I couldn't call any of the cab services from my cell phone. Like they just kept ringing. I'm like, why? This is a big city, like yellow cab answers, they all answer. And so I couldn't call from there. So I tried calling from the hotel phone, and then it rings once, twice, and I kind of hear like a patchy, like some static. And this guy answers, says something, taxi. And I'm like, okay. And we were going to go to I needed a ride to Walgreens so that my girlfriend could fill her prescription or whatever. So he's like, "Oh, well, actually, where are you guys at?" And I told him the hotel. He's like, "Oh, we're actually right outside in the parking lot." So I'm like, okay. And they pull up, we get in the car, and there's a guy in the front seat, and then there's this girl in the front seat who's got like a patch over her eye. And she obviously looks like she looked really creepy. She was definitely using some type of something. And so we're riding, and this guy's talking to me, and he's like asking us why we're there, this and that. And he says something to the extent of, "Sorry, you're all sickly." And I look over at Megan because she was going to fill her prescription of it was buprenorphine, it was Suboxone basically. And so I look over and I'm like, how would he even know that you're going to get this prescription for one? So I'm just kind of driving, and this guy starts talking about meth, starts talking about all this stuff. And I'm like, and that's like, was her drug of choice at the time. And so I'm getting like super suspect and thinking, who's this person in the front, all this and that. And then I tell him about the accident, and he goes, "Oh, my friend is actually an ex-insurance agent, or agent insurance adjuster or whatever. You should call him. You should call this number." And I'm like, at that time we get to Walgreens. By the time we're at Walgreens, I'm like screaming in the front seat, telling them, "Are you a Fed? What are you? How are you? How do you know this information?" And because he was trying to offer like meth to my girlfriend right there in the cab. And I'm like, so that's when I freaked out on him. And he's like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm not a Fed. I'm not a Fed." And I was like, "What's this lady in the front seat with a patch on over her eye?" I mean, it was crazy. And then he's like, he goes in there. He's like, "No, no, no, I'll prove it. I'll prove it." He's like, "I got a prescription here at this pharmacy of Oxycontin right now." And I'm like, at this pharmacy here at Walgreens, like, what? Like the whole thing is going. So like all that stuff was happening. Right. So I'm like completely red flags up. And I'm like, okay, this guy walks in there, goes up to the pharmacist and says a number, tells the pharmacist a number, and the guy gives him a prescription of oxycodone. And I'm just like, it was it was the weirdest thing. So like, anyway, we ended up getting back to the hotel, and I'm like, we need to leave this place now. Like, we need to get out of here. Like, we need to get out of New Mexico. You know, this whole thing is like, they're going to end up killing me down here or whatever. We need to get back because this is happening, all this stuff. And then in the meanwhile, I get a call from my dad, and my dad's like, something's wrong with your mom. I took her to the hospital. They ended up doing some testing and this and that. She has a brain tumor. They're life lighting her to Billings, and she's got to have her tumor removed. So he's like, he got me some tickets to go to Billings, Montana, but we had to wait a little bit to get up there. So anyway, all that crazy stuff was happening. But then when we got back to the hotel, on the back of the door of the hotel door, the name of the guy, the insurance adjuster, there's a magnet on the back of the door stuck to the door with this person's name on it. And it's that insurance adjuster that he mentioned was his friend that I should call about the accident. So right away, I was like, this has something to do with, like, it was just a bunch of crazy heavy stuff. So in the meantime, though, I find out that this person who had hit me, his name was Clyde Averill, and he had a long distance IR remote on my phone. I found out my phone was hacked, all this different stuff, and it was from Texas. They were monitoring from Texas, and like, I didn't find the guy's name actually connected to the IP address until later on after we had gotten to Billings. But I found, like, basically my phone was hit. I called Verizon. I told them, I'm like, my phone's doing this. I can't call people. I can't do this. And I'm basically stuck in this hotel room, and like trying to, console and keep my girlfriend calm at the time. I had weird people coming to the door, banging on the door, like people. It was just super, super, like, anything you can. It was like a nightmare, So we get to Billings, finally get out of there, and I look at the long distance, the whole thing. I found out, what was on my phone or whatever, and there was still the long distance IR remote, except it was 33 miles away from me, and it was in Billings somewhere. It was so 33 miles away from where we were at a hotel. So it was a big nightmare mess. I mean, the whole thing. I ended up getting sick and getting a staph infection by getting bit by these weird. They were tiny green little bugs, I guess they were. I took it to the ER or whatever it bit me. I was allergic to it, but my girlfriend wasn't. And I almost died. They had to have me on antibiotics for like 12 hours at a time, and all this stuff. And when I went to the hospital, I took that bug with me, and they looked at it, and they came back to the room, and a guy came in there and looked at me, sat down, and he's like, Daniel, he said, wherever you're at, you need to get out of there right now. You need to go back to where you're at, get your stuff, and leave. And he's like, and the look on his face, he's like, we don't know what it is. It's an unknown arthropod. Like, we have no idea what it is. And so I'm like, okay. And so I go back and we start loading up our stuff. And I'm telling the lady at the front desk, what's going on. And she's like, and she stops for a minute and she goes, this has happened before. And that's all she said. So it was some weird, crazy thing. Sorry, someone's coming in. So it was super crazy. And we ended up leaving, though. And so coming back to Wyoming after my mom had brain surgery, had the tumor removed, we came here, and I ended up, shortly after, my girlfriend got arrested in this hotel we were at. And I was I was sick, almost dying. I had infections. I was, on drugs. It was just a horrible mess. And so I came to stay with my mom and my dad, because, to try to help take care of my mom, get myself back together, because I was a mess. And, I started looking for help, and I couldn't find help anywhere in, the area. Like, I had to have insurance to get into any treatment centers or anything here in Wyoming. And I couldn't get insurance. And so I was trying to get into, like, any type of state funding, anything I could to get, just to get off of it. I needed even at least a detox or something to get through it. And like, I basically knew that my mother wasn't going to be around very long. And I wanted to be clean for her and everything else, so she could see me, like that. Cause it was a mess. And I felt so bad for my parents and for everyone in my life. Cause it was just a horrible place for me to be. And then, on top of it, I felt like I was, in the Truman Show. I mean, it was like because all that other stuff that was going on, I mean, I was being gang stalked, all this stuff was going on, and I had, you know, suspicions of it, and then seeing it happen, and like, you know, being in different uh, states of mind, you know, being sober, being or using or whichever it was, being alone, being with other people, the things that were happening to me, you know, I was had all this pressure and like trying to keep my sanity, you know, and trying not to use everything. And like, so I was on a lot of pills of every different variety. And I went to the doctors and I just told them, I'm like, you need to give me these pills because I'm going to go out and I don't want to overdose. I don't want to die. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to use heroin if you don't help me. I mean, like help wean me off this stuff till I can get into a treatment center. And so the doctor I spoke to, he's like, okay. He's like, usually I wouldn't do this for anybody, but he's like, I believe you. And he's like, I'll help you for this amount of time and I'll keep it, you know, I'll give you only so much at a time, this or that. So I was dealing with that and trying to get in a treatment center. And so I finally got into a place they agreed to take me in Cody, but I had to be there. Like the day that I went to go, they called me and said, hey, you have a warrant and we can't accept you unless you call them and they can wait until you get out. And it was for some stupid charge. It had to do with my girlfriend, and my girlfriend, she had taken the blame for everything because she'd taken her dad's credit card and everything and she was using it. We were in the town, like she told me when the cops came that day, she said she started crying and I was like, what did you do? And she's like, that credit card that my dad let me use, I went back and took it. And she's like, that's how I've been paying for the room and this and that. And I'm like, we've been going there, going to dinner, this and that, before talking to her parents every day. So, and I was still having to go into the hospital for like 12 hours a day and get IV antibiotics at this time. Um, and she's like, she took all the blame, everything, said she was sorry and left, but they had found some time where she sent me in to pay for something. It was like coffee or something, like $6.50. So they were holding me on a warrant and I couldn't go to treatment unless I took care of this warrant. And, you know, her father was a district judge of the place where I was at too. So that was another a whole thing. So anyway, they wouldn't waive it. And so I had to turn myself in. So I went to go turn myself in. I told my mom, I'll see you in a few days. And then, or, you know, I thought I'd be in there for like 5 days, whatever. I go in there and 2 days later, they call me to the front and tell me, your mom's in the hospital. She's got hours to days to live. And so I was in jail and I was stuck in jail and I couldn't do anything. So I was trying to get out, you know, on a furlough on anything. And they wouldn't let me out. And so I had a friend out here who I'd call my dad. And I mean, I call her to talk to my dad. And I just called, it was at 7:40 at night. And I called her and she called my dad and my dad said, your mom just passed. So it was right then and there, like she had just passed. And but I could feel it and I knew it. And I called and like I was flying kites trying to get out. And the next morning, nobody had even read my kites or anything. None of them. So at the front, I was on the phone and one of the guys, the cool CO, one of them, he heard me and he's like, your mom passed? I said, yeah, I've been trying to get out. I said, so I could go see her. And then he called and like within an hour, I was out of there. But they let me out only on a 17-day, I mean, on a 4-day furlough. And I had to go back. So I had all that going on with me. And on top of everything else, my mom passing and my whole life was up in shambles and in ruins. And so when I got out, I tried to stay clean, whatever I could. I made it for maybe about a week and went back to the doctor and was like, you need to give me this because I'm going to kill myself and out here doing this, like, and until I can get help. So he continued to help me. And I was at a loss because it had been like 3-4 months, 5 months at this time. And I was, basically just like, I was yelling at God. I remember days I would just pass out, just like yelling at God and just screaming and crying. I was so pissed. I was so mad. I was just like, why won't you take this from me? Why isn't there a door that's going to open? Isn't something, and one night I'm sitting there and I get a phone call and this lady's on the phone and she goes, yeah, we heard that you're looking for treatment. And I was like, or are you looking for treatment? And I was like, yes, I am. And she said, okay, well, I have an opportunity for you. she's like, would you be willing to travel? Would you be willing to, get on a plane in like 4 days or whatever? If we could say she's like, if I could have a plane ticket covered, a place for you to go to detox, everything paid for, would you go? And I said, well, yeah, yeah, I'll go. And I was like, there's no way this is real. And I never reached out to this place, never called this place, nothing. So I was like, that right there. And I was like, okay, maybe some boat treatment center called this place, or like, I was just trying to think of how else would these people call me or whatever. But I was so excited and I was like, I'll do it. What do I need to do? And she's like, well, first, let me make a phone call. She said, we have an anonymous, somebody who will fund this for you, but they want to do an interview and they're gonna be anonymous and they'll be on mute, but they want to interview or hear you while we do an interview. So, they were asking me all these questions and I did this whole interview and it was like a whole life story kind of thing. Almost. It was pretty long. It was like 45 minutes, an hour that they were talking to me about all this stuff and asking me about, my life, what I wanted to do, how I ended up where I got, like what my mindset was now, like what if I wasn't to get treated, what if they said no, what would I do, and like all this stuff. And so, after that, it was like, I think it was about like a day later, maybe a day or two, she's like, we'll call you back as soon as possible. She called me back and she goes, okay, well, Daniel, we have a plane ticket for you. Well, you'll be flying out of here in 2 days, or it was like 2 or 3 days or something. And I was like, I think it was like turned into like 4 days because I had to do a few things. But so, and then, I got on the plane. I took the last of what I had for pills and I, jumped on the plane and went to Palm Desert, California, and got picked up by some guy was holding when I arrived there. Some guy was holding a sign with my name. They put me in the van, took me to this house, somewhere in the suburbs of California. I'd never been there, and it was like, I went in there, and it was that's where the journey began. After going through detoxing, there I was detoxing hard and heavy for a good 2 days, and they did a medicated assistant type thing and lowered me down and got me off of everything. And then they threw me into they got me into the program part, like to reprogram you. And, the whole thing, it was like I had a whole treatment team and everything designated for me. There was all these different people for different parts of my team. And I went and met them and they told me what they expected of me, what they had to offer. And like, so I started just going. We get up every morning and get on the van and go to this place. And it turned into pretty quickly, like it wasn't just me, it was other people. It was Katie. Like there was a group of us, more than just three. It was like almost like half of us who were there were like pretty sure that we were like, picked or something, because we all were talking and everyone who was there had like, they did something like, they were either like an artist, a musician, or they had some type of, fame or, whatever it was. They were like special people who were dealing with drug addiction on one level or another, and who all had knowledge that something, that basically we've been lied to, in the world that we're living in is not, what they claim that it is. And and then some of the waivers and things we had to sign, like that they could record us and do video and do audio, or whatever at any time. And like we had to sign that it was okay.
I don't remember that, but I
Like,
believe you, but I don't remember that.
yeah, it was in there. It was in the
Yeah.
paperwork that they could do video and audio or whatever, and they could record or take video and pictures or whatever of you. I don't, so that was
Yeah.
what was weird to me. And I was like, okay, why would this be? I mean, I get it when we're at the center because they had cameras
Yeah.
in the center, like the main one. But
Oh,
like
yeah.
I was like, does this apply to the other places that we're at? Because they were like little apartments and different things and like, or whatever. So I mean, I'm not saying that it was or that it wasn't, but like a lot of the things that were going on there. But we can get into a little bit more of that. But that's where I met Katie, though. She was sitting out there, and we started talking, and like right away we started clicking. Right away, and it was about like, part of it was your voice too. It was part of it was your voice, your eyes, and just what you were talking about. Because right away I was like, okay, then yeah, I know she knows. I'm not crazy. There's at least one more right here that I know that knows something. Like of what's going on and on this other level, you know. And then the other people we started kind of talking to together, and you know, she started showing me some of the stuff that she was writing, and I actually still have a notebook of some of that stuff.
Oh, you
That
do?
Oh my
I
God.
do. I'll dig it out for you because I still have it.
Okay.
I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
Wow.
yeah, that's how I got there. I mean, I know it might sound jumbled and a lot, but like, you
No,
know, I always was in a bad place, and you know, by the grace of God, I'm at where I'm at right now, you know, which is definitely not where I was. And but that's how it started. So,
Yeah.
you know,
thank God. Wow. And again, it really makes me every day, and it almost like makes me want to cry, like thinking about everything that both of you went through, and it makes you really contemplate how you see people every day. That like you walk by all these normal
Yeah.
people who, like I said, like we put on these masks and these labels and we function like normal people. And inside, like some people are just going through insufferable battles, that nobody knows anything about. And we pass these people all the time, and to think about how traumatizing and, for both of you to have so much happen at once where you're dealing with family stuff, you're trying to contend with weird things that are going on in your life suddenly and having these like breakthroughs like through the matrix almost where all of a sudden you're just hit one day where it's like things aren't how I thought they were, and trying to contend with that, dealing with trauma that you're going through, it's like, man, both of you have just really interesting backstories, and it resonates with me a lot thinking about how many different ways people are unknowingly targeted for things that they have no idea are happening around them, and how sophisticated some of this can be with, like you said, Daniel, state to state, you're seeing the same person. Katie, with your story, you have all these random people that, maybe we can't prove that they're all connected, just like, a lot of this stuff, they don't give you evidence to prove it, but when you look back, you see that there's this web where things do connect and they seem so random in the moment, and it's not until hindsight where it's like, oh my gosh, like this person was connected to that and to this organization which was connected to this person, and like was it all random, and it's really validating for people. There's a lot of people who go through targeting and they're not believed and they feel isolated and crazy, and they're made to be crazy, and when you think about these breakdowns that people have that lead them to that sort of rock bottom, you really have to think, what is that person actually going through? Like, are they crazy? Like how, it seems on the outside? Or is there something happening where they're breaking through and seeing the world in a different way that seems crazy to people because they're still back behind the veil? And I love that both of you have that in common, and it's really neat that we can come here together and you guys can share this together because it corroborates. It's very rare that you get, two people that have gone through what we're going to talk about, which is this experience that you both had together at this rock bottom moment, and you can both corroborate each other's stories and validate them, and in turn, you two coming together and doing this, you're giving a voice to everybody else who is being called crazy right now, or who is in, a treatment center, or who's calling their doctor saying, please prescribe me medicine, or I'm going to go, kill myself. Like, this conversation is for all those people, and I'm really grateful that we get to have it today, even though it's a really hard conversation. I really appreciate you guys sharing these very vulnerable parts of your life. It makes people feel less alone. And I'm sorry you both had to go through that. And like I said, it's just amazing to listen to you today and to see where you're at. So let's pick up where you two meet. So first of all, let's talk about, and one of you or both of you, what is sovereign health? Like, if one of you guys could sort of talk about what exactly this facility is, where it's at, maybe paint the picture of what it's like for people, and then we can sort of dive into your friendship and this journey of going through this program that you guys went through together.
All right.
okay.
Well, Daniel spent a lot more time there than I did. I had to like claw my way out. But Sovereign Health is, or was rather, because it's no longer, a it was considered a residential treatment program. It was there was a lot of different houses in Coachella Valley, and like there were some in LA and kind of like spread throughout California and the Southern California part. I know there were other sovereigns in other states. I think we discussed that in the beginning of the intro. Um, but what it was for us was like a place, it was for people with co-occurring disorders. So like if you're a substance abuser and you have mental health issues or perceived mental health issues, then they're like, okay, this is like where you send those people. And so when we got there, we thought we were going there for mental health and substance abuse detox. But it became apparent while we were there that like a lot more was going on at Sovereign Health. And um, I don't know, Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit more about the what is Sovereign Health question?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, go ahead and chime in.
Well, at first glance, like when I got there, I was like, this has got to be like too good to be true. This is like paradise almost in a way,
Mm-hmm.
coming out all that to where I was at. So like, I'm in California, it's warm, like these people are gonna take care of me while I sit here and like get through what I need to get through and detox or all this whole thing is like so for me, I was just like, I can't even believe that this is happening. Like, this is an amazing thing. And like getting there and starting to go like after they sent us from one house, like they kind of see, they see how you do there because some people, not everyone
Mm-hmm.
went there. Some people got sent to other facilities after that. Like some of them went to Culver City
Or
or to
Clemente, San
San Clemente.
Clemente. Yeah.
But I stayed there and I went to an apartment. It was like basically like they had bought an apartment complex. And that was kind of the situation I was staying in. So we all shared a room. It was like 2 to 3 people for, like a little apartment area,
But
so.
that was outpatient. That wasn't before. When we were there, we were in like a house. Weren't you in like a house?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah.
so, okay, so yeah, I'm sorry, like dialing back to where we came from. Um, Sorry to cut you off there. But yeah, so like they had us in all these houses basically tucked in the suburbs in the country club zone of Palm Desert, like tennis courts and pools. We had like pools in our backyards. We were hidden in plain sight. So I didn't realize like the extent of the security detail or the privacy on our situation because we were just tucked away in these suburbs in the country club. But like we weren't allowed to go outside at all in the front yard without having, unless we were leaving to exit to get in the van to go somewhere.
Yes.
We could hang out in our backyard because it just faced a runway, like a golf green, and like we had a pool, and our neighbors that were next to us were probably other sovereign houses. And like so we had these really nice houses with these full pantries, like stuffed with anything you could imagine. It felt like Daniel said, like it felt like celebrity treatment, like heaven, if you're coming from a really dark, like low place or a really like discombobulated place where I was just scrambled. It felt like I was getting like this very cozy, welcoming type environment. It wasn't gross and it wasn't like shady looking at all. It looked very nice exteriorly. And so we were in these homes, and then they would bring us in the daytime to this main center that was like a campus that they had in the center of the town. And on the campus, they had a main center room where they had us all gather. And then they had all these other classrooms like everywhere. And there was like going to school, like going to college for, deviants. And and that's how I would describe it, right? And they wanted you to be in all your classes, like you had a roster, like you had a schedule of classes, just like going to college. And and so like remember our other friend Daniel? He liked to ditch class quite a bit, and we used to like, get
Yes.
called out if we were ditching. But um we all became friends at the center. That's how we got to know each other because all the men had men houses, women were in women's houses. And then they put us all together in the center. And there was probably like, what, 100, 120 of us, maybe?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
would say.
around that in the center. And um, so it kind of felt like a little private experience in like I don't know, like a private college rehab type experience. I don't know how to explain it. Um, and it was like not a typical what I would call like I guess what I would have expected for a residential treatment program. Um, they had us in there in the very first day. I remember in the main center, we're sitting down in our chairs and this lady stands up and she stands with her like little clipboard and she's hollering at the whole room talking, and she goes, "You are here to be deprogrammed and reprogrammed." And then my mind's all like triggered because I'm like, oh, like this isn't helping my delusions again. I'm still thinking I might be crazy because I don't know what to believe is real or not at this point, but I'm like picking up on everything. And I forgot to mention before I left Sovereign, I picked up a couple, or before I left for Sovereign, I picked up a couple random things at the hospital that I was like intuitively drawn to, or they were just like articles that were left out, maybe that I grabbed. And one of them was a military t-shirt that said "Death Before Dishonor" on it and had this Japanese writing. And the other was a book called Fractal Time by Greg Braden. And I felt like I was supposed to take those with me like they were comms. And in my mind, I was like still like running this other part of me that was like on a mission, thought I was picking up comms like material. And when I got to Sovereign, like that first day in the center, I meet a guy who has this tattoo on his neck, and it's the same writing that's on the t-shirt that I pick up. And I go up to him and I'm like, "What does that mean?" And he says, "Death before dishonor." And I was like, "Oh," I was like, and my mind just immediately knew. I was like, "We're supposed to meet here. I've got a message for you." And I give him the t-shirt, and he and I like immediately like synced up. Like we both knew exactly what the other person knew about everything, all of that conspiratory stuff. And he was intuitive too. And his name was Kenji. I'm going to talk about Kenji. This is Kenji. He was reading me, and he was like like picking up on all this stuff, and I'm like, "No, man, I do not work for the CIA." I kept telling him that because he thought I worked for the CIA. And he kept saying, "I know you're a Fed." He's like, "Your microfacial expressions don't change when I ask you questions." And I was like, "What do you mean? I didn't understand any of this." So Daniel was another person I met at the center, and like we hit it off the same way. I started sharing openly like my crazy thoughts, and then everyone else was like, "Yeah, here's some more information. Here's some more pieces to that." And Daniel was one of them, and you gave me like a journal full of information, full of intel that put all of my crazy to bed, because I was like, "Okay, it can't be like a coincidence that every single person I'm meeting here has a little piece of the puzzle." So then I give this book. I meet a guy named Mike, and he tells me that he's a time traveler and that he can like walk through walls, and like he like has this whole crazy story, right? And I knew before he told me any of this, I met this guy and I was like, "I have this book for you." And I just gave it to him. It was Fractal Time. And it was about that book. If you haven't read it, it's about how events in history, they recur in cyclical fashion. Like history repeats itself. And I always say, like, here we are in fractal time because we experience the same energetic, like sort of influence, cosmic influence, and predictive types of events. And if we understand the math of fractal time, we can actually predict outcomes and plan for them to try to change like the course of history. I mean, that's how I read the book in a nutshell. And so I was like, "I must give you this book." And so I give this guy the book, and he's like lights up and he's so ecstatic that like he reads this, and it put all these pieces together for him. And that's when he starts to tell me about being a time traveler, and saying how he does it. And he was explaining his method to me, exactly of how he would get his body into a certain state. I won't tell people this right now because I don't know if I should, but like he would do specific things to break down his body in his consciousness a certain way. And he said he would like basically teleport, and he ended up in some tunnels underground, a train station. And he's telling me like all the stuff he saw while he was in these tunnels. And so I'm like listening because I have a way open mind at this point after what I experienced in my binary code moment. I'm like, "Yeah, I believe you." I'm just like listening to it all. And that was just like how every interaction was at Sovereign. You'd meet somebody, and it was like a divine appointment, and then that person would pass you some information, or you'd pass information to them. And then I started to think to myself, this has got to be a social experiment, putting all of these people together who all happen to think the same way or have cooperating craziness that, like, just like makes each other's crazy look like it's sane. I was like, this has to be like, where are the cameras? And of course, apparently there were cameras. I think I knew, but like a part of me was disassociated and didn't like pay attention to those things. Like I never paid attention to what I was signing or anything back then. But anyways, carry on. Do you want to say something?
I was gonna say, Daniel, did you want to add any? She had mentioned a couple of people that she met right away, and I know
Yeah.
you had mentioned a couple. Was there anything else that really stood out to you initially about when you first got there and people that you had met?
The people that I'd met, I just noticed that it seemed like a lot of people had someone, like they lost someone important, or like within like a year or like 6 months, or like something really traumatic had happened. But there was like certain synchronicities and that manner, like people had certain things happen in their life beforehand, and just that, and people were basically, awake to a lot of the things that were going on around them, or they were on in some way, shape, or form on the path, through that journey, wherever they were at, but everyone was in like a certain everyone there was walking that path. They were walking that path to becoming enlightened, and the veil being removed, and they were in a process of being awakened. And that's what I noticed. And the other thing was like just how many people they had focused on, one person for like your whole team of people, and like that, then what they were like, the classes and the things that they wanted us to do. Like they were really pushing me to they wanted me to get my to map my brain. So, and the guy that was the head of my team, I can't remember his name. For some reason I can't remember a lot of their names. But he was really, really wanted me to get my brain mapped, and was telling me all these different things that they could do, and like how beneficial it would be. And I was super sketched about it, because I'm like, I don't know about that. And then it came on later on through, like, the psychiatrist who Doc Hollywood, I guess we call him. He was like, Whitney Houston's psychiatrist, and Eminem, and he's like, so you're a musician? And I said, yes. And he's like, if we can map your brain, and like we can hit him with certain frequencies and stuff. He's like, Eminem does this. And he's like, you'd be a better musician, and like all this stuff. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. Like, the medication, and he was pushing this medication on a lot of everyone too. And it started with an F. Almost like Fatima, or not Fatima, but like Fatisma or something. And he pushed me into like trying it. So I tried it for like 2 or 3 days. And the second night I took it, I lost time. I woke up, went to sleep in my bed, and I woke up. I had to walk around a whole pool, not fall into it, and walk into a room, where they have like breakfast and different stuff in the morning. And I woke up on the couch in there, like it was the second or third day after taking it. And so I stopped taking it. But I started talking to other people, and I was like, did he try to give you this or this pill? And he's like, yeah, he did. He said it would be good for, anxiety. I'm like, he told me it would be good for hair. He's like, oh, it's great for people who are ex-hair or heroin addicts or whatever. It works great. And he was just telling everybody, whoever it was, he's like, take this
Mm-hmm.
medication. It's good for whatever. So those two things stood out to me at the beginning, or those three things. And so yeah, that's what I'll add for right now.
The drugs, like just to touch back on the drugging, Doc Hollywood was kind of like scary intimidating. His personality was like kind of a jerk, but he was so nice to me, and I felt like I was getting special treatment because he was known to be like intimidating and like a jerk and like kind of like belittling almost to people. Like he would talk down to them and be like, this is the way it is. This is what you need. And I was afraid he was going to cut me to shreds when I got in his chair. And instead, it was like like I was talking to a colleague. He would sit in the chair and he'd talk to me like we're on the same level. Like we think the same, we know the same things. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And he wanted me at the end of like my time there, he wanted me to go to med school, and he was on the board of like a college medical school. And he had said that if I want to go to med school, that he would get me into that college med school, that he would give me a recommendation and get me in. And like he was like trying to write a prescription for my life, like when I leave, like go here, move here, go to med school. And I was like, okay, like, so it felt like everywhere I went, like my relationships with men and men in authority, or men who had like these, they were always like a buddy, a friend, or like they were always like a, let me help you with getting your life together. Let me send you over here. Um, it felt like I was being like nurtured a lot by these, instead of being treated like an actual patient or like a crazy person. I felt like people were sort of, well, at least for me, that's how my experience was. I don't know if everybody else had that experience.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's interesting too, just hearing how,
Yeah.
society, like when we think about people that say get treatment for an addiction problem, like we're taught really that like addiction is kind of just some random choice that somebody makes where they're like, oh, I'm just gonna go, I have nothing better to do. I'm just gonna start drinking. And granted, there's some people that might do that, but I think, addiction is a symptom for trying to sort of cover up trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really like uncovering that where you're saying like it's not your, homeless person off the street where they seem crazy. Like these are very smart people, very gifted people. These are people that are very intelligent, that have like a lot of insights and downloads that, the general public doesn't, and all these people are sort of convening together, and having these very sophisticated conversations that you can't have in real life. And so I wanted to ask, like, how was this structured? So what did maybe a day or a week look like going to Sovereign, and how many people were, say, on your team? Like what did it look like for a patient there? Because I think too, this is probably different than what people might think a treatment center could be like.
Take that one, Daniel.
Okay. So, a day that you would start, you'd wake up, I think it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I think we had to be at the center between 7:30, 8 o'clock, is what I remember. So we'd all get up, and whoever would cook, we'd take turns cooking, and then we get on the van and drive to the center. And first thing we'd meet in the main room, and it was like whoever would be, all the classes happen mostly in the main room. I mean, there were ones to the side, so whoever it was that day, I mean, it was different days. I'm trying to remember exactly my memory of how the classes went, but I remember there would be like, I can't remember I can't remember how they shifted around, but so there'd be like 2 or 3 classes in the main room, and they would be somebody talking about, whatever class it was. A lot of it was like trying to, be aware of like to, to let people be self-aware, to show them like what's going on around them, or like, anxiety or different things, different exercises to kind of like be in tune with yourself, get comfortable, like different, things that you can do. One of them, it really seemed to pushed a lot to, I want to say there was a lot of new age kind of stuff that was going on, or like ideas and stuff like that, so you would do that, and you had to sign up for one or another. Like I had a yoga class, so I would go and I do yoga, and we had this yoga instructor who was, she was really cool, you know, so we did that, and I can't remember, um, what the other classes are. I'm having trouble, Katie. What,
Okay, I'll take it.
like, yeah,
Um,
I can't yeah.
so we had all these classes, and they were different types of therapies. Um, some were like one I remember specifically was a like a crisis therapy one, where the women were separated from the men for this particular one. Like the women in my group, it was probably maybe 10 or 12 of us in a room together. And we had this one woman who was from Romania, and she was a doctor she specialized in trauma-based recovery. And she was really a saint, Margie. I don't know where she is today, but she was like had like a thick accent, and she really like she made us do a lot of like trauma processing in that room. So that was like a heavy room where people went around and like basically unpacked their heaviest shit that you would never tell anybody outside of that room. And that's
Mm.
when I got to hear a lot of women talk, because the guys told me their stories outside at the smoking table. I heard every guy tell me what their deal was, but the women, that's when I really got to find out like the patterns be patterning in these sessions. And the women, a lot of them experience what sounds like satanic ritual abuse situations. Like almost every girl in the room had child sexual abuse. Um, it was like a normal, like common denominator, I think. And there were different levels of abuse that different people had. Like, and there were things like I was told by both the boys and the girls that I met there that I was actually like flabbergasted. Like, I didn't know that those things could even happen at all in the United States, let alone, you know, like one person talked about being trafficked as a child, taken from their mother at gunpoint when they were 2, and forced into prostitution, and was forced to be in the cages with other kids and fight to the death, and like told me stories about like having to like fight with like golf clubs and stuff, and like, you know, and there was um I am trying to like watch what I say because I forgot this is YouTube. Um, I they had to unalive people, and that was like a survival thing, but that was what they were forced to do is children. And I remember being shocked, thinking like this is like the stuff they do in like the bush in Uganda when they're trying to do trauma-based programming to the kids to make them be soldiers. They make them witness or take out one another, and that I couldn't believe that that was actually something that was happening or had happened in my generation with children in the United States. This boy that told me this story was in Florida. And mind you, this guy was a screenwriter in Hollywood at the time, you know, and he's telling me his backstory, and, you know, and then there were girls that were like abused by their fathers or stepfathers, or family members, or somebody did something that, you know, and you know, you've heard enough SRA and CSA stories to know they're pretty much like they pattern. And a lot of them, like, I met another woman who was like, I can't say her name, but she was like, she scared the heck out of me because she was this beautiful, powerful, but terrifying Black woman. She had like these gorgeous, piercing eyes, and she had this goddess-like energy wherever she went. And if you were on her wrong side, it was like, oh, it was like, I don't want to do that. And so she ended up being my roommate. And I was so afraid of her at first because I was kind of like the airhead there. Like, I got out of the pool and I would go sit down like in the office on a chair and get it wet, and somebody would come in after me and get mad because I wet the seat. And so I thought she was gonna like unalive me because I did that one time. And um then like she ended up becoming my actual roommate. We had to share like a master suite together. And I thought, okay, God, like help me out. And we ended up well, anyways, we ended up becoming friends, but I'll tell you it was a little road to get there. Um so she asked me she told me first as we got to know each other that um she owned like, or she ran like her own agency. Like, she kind of and I were similarly patterning where we were both recruiters of women, and her work was escort work, and it was like actually like, and so she was a madam. She had started her way up from the bottom being like a regular escort herself, and then she ended up having her own little ring. And when we exchanged our details, we were like, oh, okay, like, nice to meet you, I get you now, like, you're a boss babe, okay. Like, it was just like, it's a weird, because it was taboo, but yet we both understood each other's world where we came from. And so there was a little like trust there. And then at some point she asked me, she had said that she was planning to take herself out while she was at Sovereign, and she had wanted me to help her execute an elaborate plan to do that, where she was going to like leave the place and get somebody to take her out. Like, and she had a strategic plan for it, and I won't go into that detail here, but she asked me to do my part in making sure the operation went down. And I was like, at that time, like kind of like like a little conflicted because I'm like, I don't want to help somebody unalive themselves and assist them in this stuff, but I also didn't know what would happen if I had said something or asked like for intervention, or if I told like the people there, the Sovereign people, like, hey, my roommate wants me to help her do this. So I was more afraid of what would happen if somebody tried to stop her than if like we just let nature run its course. And so at that point, I had convinced myself, like, if she really wants to do this, nothing's going to stop her from doing it. And stopping her right now is only going to prolong the next attempt. So I said, okay. I went back to her and I was like, I'll help you. And like I just nodded in my head and I said, I'll help you. And I just acknowledged her instead of trying to talk her out of it. And like, I don't know what happened, but like she had like a radical like God moment, or something happened to her on her birthday, which was the following day, and she realized she wanted to live, and she was like, plans off. So I was like, oh, thank God, like the plans off. I don't have to go through with that. You don't have to go through with that. But that made her trust me even more, and it made us like become actual like friends. So um she ended up like, yeah, telling me her backstory too, and she was just another woman who had another CSA history that was pretty severe, and that's how she got into the pathway that she ended up taking as well. And then she didn't just graduate into that, like she was a normal, like she had a professional life, a professional job. She was a businesswoman, but she also like had this deviation over here that was like this other thing that she had, prior, I guess, like past life experience before, you know. And so a lot of us patterned very similarly. Like everyone there was really smart. And I don't mean that to like fluff ourselves up here, but they all had gifts in like different kinds of gifts. Like we had people with synesthesia that could see colors when they heard sounds. And we had people with just tons of different varieties of ESP, people who thought they could time travel, people who thought they could teleport, people who, I mean, it felt like the X-Men all came together in real time. Let me just say, if that's going to be delusional, fine.
Yeah.
If you're still listening, you already think I'm either crazy or you're interested in this conversation. But yeah, we were probably like the real life X-Men that showed up to the party.
Mm.
Did you want to add anything to that, Daniel?
Okay, yes, but it really was kind of like the X-Men, because I mean, people were there. There was people there that like seemed like you would think. I mean, well, normal people would think that they were absolutely like crazy. Like they had people there that were like walking back and forth, talking to themselves, but like what they were completely seeing through all the way through. They had all the lights, all the doors open, and
Mhm.
were trying to like be there and like trying to like it seemed like you'd have to they'd have to dumb themselves down to have like a conversation because of the frequency of the plane that they were on, what they were seeing and going through. And it was really comforting, because a lot of like for me too, because a lot of the people we were on the same, I mean, it was like frequencies of like
Mhm.
we're picking up on numbers. I mean, just so many different things together. And it was like having like, a mass, or everybody like together was like all experiencing the same thing. And
Mhm.
like at one point, me and Katie we were sitting in there and we
Yeah.
were talking about, like predicting what was going to happen. We were sitting there writing notes back and forth to each other about predicting what people were going to say, what they were going to do, and see if we could change and get people to like do or start talking about what we were thinking or writing about. And so it started happening right in front of us, and we were watching it, and we were sitting back there laughing because there's no way this is happening. Like we were just like we're doing it. So we started, we like through, you know, we're just sitting there like trying to like test it out, see, okay, well, let's try this or like whatever and
Yeah.
see. So it was really crazy. I mean, because the people that were there, it was like, I swear it was like angels and demons, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
together. Because there were people there that said things to me, just a few words that I keep to this day, that was like enough strength. And somebody, he came up to me and said, you know what, sometimes an angel's got to take one for the team and just let it go.
Yeah.
And he told me, just, he said, just let it go, just,
What?
you know, it's bigger than you type thing, you know. And like a lot of the classes and stuff, it seems like it was like somewhat blurred together in some aspect, because like the things in the groups, for me it was like the one-on-ones, and then have the team of people that were with me, what they were talking to me about, like, and the subjects they kept bringing up, you know, trying to get me to talk about certain things. And a lot of it was like, you know, I was, you know, sexually abused, you know, as a child, and later on, like in life, and taken advantage of in that type of way. But it was like they kept trying to bring that up, you know, to me, to get me to talk about certain things, or like that I had experienced. And like some of the stuff that I was like, I know I said like 100 times, but um,
You're good.
just the things that I was experiencing, you know, and what I was seeing, they wanted to hear, you know, what my actual thoughts were on it. And at point in time, I thought that they were trying to find a reason that they could like keep me there medically, or like, you know what I mean, trying to get me to talk about these things and telling me it's okay to like talk about what you're seeing, what you really think about what's going on around you, you know, where you're at spiritually. And they kept trying to push me forward, like, you know, to doing certain things to that would like the mapping of my brain, the hitting it with frequencies, different things they were trying to do. And they kept saying that this will make you better, this will make what you have right now even more clear, it'll help you be more successful. And like it later on in, you know, towards the end of this, because I had to like fight to get out of there, the same, you know, like how, you know, Katie did, because they wanted to keep me there. I had to like completely bluff them and say I was calling my attorneys, this whole thing, to get them
Mm-hmm.
exposed and expose them. I was like, I know what you guys are doing, this, and that. And to where, you know, they went in there, talked to their people, came back out, and basically gave me everything I wanted, my list of demands in the time frame that I wanted it. And I said that I would stay quiet and that I would, you know, I would leave as long as they got me where I wanted to be. But I mean, they wanted me to stay and go. The guy who had a celebrity detox, I don't know exactly the guy's name. It was on TV, a TV show, but he ran sober living houses and things there. But he was really trying to get me to stay there, and thought that I'd be a good, you know, fit for their house. They were trying to do anything and everything they could to keep me there. I mean, and yeah, we can go into more of that later. But I mean, even like they asked if they could monitor me later on when I left there through
Mm-hmm.
an app. They had an app that they wanted to keep track of people and this and that. And it was I already thought that they already were doing that anyway, because
What
of some
app
of this.
was it?
I can't remember what it was. I never downloaded it
Do you
though.
remember what it looked like?
No, I never saw the app. Robin, remember Robin with she had hair, her color hair was like your color hair. She'd always wear those like colorful different jackets and stuff. And she was, I don't know if you remember her.
I
If you
remember
saw,
Robin.
yeah, Robin, it was, she was the one who told me that when I left there. And she was the one who also called me and said that,
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to do that TV show after. She called me and it told me, that somehow the producer of Survivor, she was talking to the guy who produced Survivor somehow, some way, and he was looking for people to do a TV show. So they called me and wanted me to do an interview with his producer to be on this TV show called The Gift, where they would like reunite people. They wanted to reunite me with my son that I had never met at the time. And so I did do the interview, but she sent me this disclosure, a non-disclosure, where I couldn't, you know, basically I had to sign away with the rights to my own story and everything for like the next 5 years. And uh, you know, I ended up signing it, but I never did do the show because I didn't want to have my son on TV and all this stuff. I thought about kind of like what it would bring and the motives behind it. And then I went back to the music studio after the fact, and that's like where you know the end of all this kind of came into where the deal with the devil kind of came up, and that whole thing happened. But I won't go into all that now. I don't want to go off topic though in this.
Wow.
But
We could definitely talk about that. I'd love to talk about sort of like your lives after this. So let's dive into that in a little bit after we sort of talk about your experiences within
okay.
here. I know it all goes together. It's hard to,
Yeah.
blur sometimes, especially with these connections that follow you outside of this. So while you guys were in there, you had mentioned, Katie, that in some of the information that you sent me before the show about the deprogramming and reprogramming. Looking back, what do both of you think that meant, and how was that incorporated? What were they trying to program, and what were they trying to deprogram?
Okay. So for me, I remember like it was a lot of first, they were just trying to get me to like crack, I guess, because I was so masked. I didn't know that I was even masked. Like Kenji had pointed out, my microfacial expressions were just, and I'm probably still a little bit like this to this day. It's not conscious, but like I can like just go into like kind of like a stone face or like not responsive where you can't read me. And I was at that level when I was in all my therapy where I wasn't giving them anything real. I was giving them all these other parts of my personality. And then 30 days in, I finally cracked, I guess, and cried. And I said something real. And the therapist was like, oh, thank goodness. Like he finally broke, like one of my layers came off, And then after that, I was like sent to these classes that it was kind of like reorienting you or maybe not reorienting you, but like stabilizing your consciousness after you've had a experience that takes you out of the third dimension. Like out of like my conscious mind was blown way out of 3D. I don't think I've ever been a 3D thinker. I think I've always been at somewhere in the fourth dimension or fifth or beyond. But like when I had my binary code moment where I saw all the stuff and I thought I was a computer, reality for me became like very confusing. Time became very confusing. And so they put me in like a class. I remember I was in this class with Miguel. Do you remember Miguel? I don't know. He was like
Yes.
one of the teachers. And they gave us these like worksheets and stuff. And one of them was on Einstein's theory of relativity. And they were teaching this and explaining. And by the way, like I already was studying quantum physics and all that in the background while I was doing this BDSM stuff. I was like studying quantum physics and astrology, numerology, sacred geometry. Like my brain was like this other person, while I was this BDSM girl at the same time. And I was a mom. So I was like kind of all these personalities. And they were trying to take all of that and like give it some foundation of grounding, I think. So like I got taught about Einstein's theory of relativity, even though I already knew it. I was like being refreshed and they kept reinforcing that time is an illusion. And then I remember like they really like wanted you to know like how to communicate and how to present yourself when you left. They split us up into groups. I remember this one Saturday class that we had to go to on a Saturday. We had to go to the center for some reason, which wasn't really typical. And or maybe it was, but it was like Saturday morning and we were all in this like groups with the boys and the girls. And my therapist, Tom, was leading this group and he made us split up into different teams and get a piece of paper and he had like me be the team leader for my team and then we had to discuss with our team like what we thought was important for people to know about us on social media and what parts we should leave out. Like what parts are not necessary for people to know about you on social media. So it was like this group philosophical discussion about how we're going to present ourselves on social media, which I thought, I guess that could be good and that could be healthy. but it also felt like a lot of us were being groomed for how to present ourselves in general, like to the public, because there was some sort of knowledge that like a lot of the people there carried a lot of knowledge, and they all had different ideas that were probably going to be considered, whistleblower statements or conspiracy theories to the general public. And so they wanted to make sure like we were grounded and that we knew how to speak and how to present ourselves to the outside world. So about that, that's like the reprogramming part, was like, we're going to teach you how to act so that you don't go squealing about like MK Ultra, and you know what I mean? Because that's what got me basically sent away in the first time. Of course I was using substances, but like it wasn't until I started having those MK conversations that I got thrown into rehabilitative places. Um, and so, there was that, the deprogramming, a lot of it was like, honestly, I feel like part of the deprogramming was just our social interactions with each other, like having that ability to all come together collectively and then take like this big breath, like, like their crazy matched my crazy, and so I felt like all of a sudden I'm not alone and I'm not hysterical anymore. I don't feel traumatized anymore by these like targeting ideas that I'm being targeted, or ideas that like this is happening because these people around me are all substantiating my stories and my intuitive feelings about things with their stories and with their experiences and their intuitive feelings. And so I feel like part of the deprogramming social experiment, or whatever you want to call it, was putting a special type of people together in one place, finding out what happens when you bring all these different types of people together, and seeing like it could have been a reality TV show for all we know. Like it was like, what happens when you bring all these people together, these
Yeah.
divergents, from across the globe, and what, like watch what happens next. And that's kind of what the experience was like, especially when we were at the center. I don't know. Is that like what you remember?
I do. It was absolutely like that. And I felt like for me, it was like everyone knew that I knew, or that like, it was like everyone knew that I knew, or was coming into the realization of all this information and all this stuff, and trying to like either explain to me why, you know, everyone else isn't supposed to know this, or kind of like, and like you're saying, to be grounded in this, and trying to get me to go down a certain path with it, to where I would either become part of it, and continue with it, and become on that side of the spectrum, saying it's light, but I believe and know it's false light. It's not, I don't believe that that's the truth at all. I mean, but I believe that all those abilities and all those things are gifts that are given, and I believe that they can be hijacked by the enemy. But I was really kind of like felt pulled in a certain way, like, or being guided in a certain way, and being told that it was okay for me to like to have all these things. Like they were really trying to get me to talk about a lot of it, and there was one of them that I did speak with, and she related to me quite a bit, but she was really trying to get me to like just be able to converse with her openly and not feel so you know I don't know, I almost thought she was trying to see how much of it I knew, and what I knew. It was almost like they were trying to break down the anatomy of an addict, an addict mind, or like to
Mm-hmm.
to get like the whole with the brain mapping thing. That was what got me. Like they wanted to like truly like see what's going on, and why why these doors are open in my mind. Or it was almost like it puts off a signal, like they can tell that, or something, like, what I mean, in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form, like your energies, your Taurus field is just putting off a certain type of energy or something that you're exposed to it. And so it was like that. And being reintegrated back into society, and then like with the different offers and different things that they gave me, and wanted me to continue to stay there, or like guide my life after and track me, really made me think that it was a social experiment. And I did benefit greatly from, a lot of the things that were taught there, and being around the people that that were my people, you know, and not feeling alone and being able to help other people, because it was like that. There was people I was
Mm-hmm.
telling people information and they were like, you're right, it is that, you know, and it was able to help them in a lot of ways. And the same thing with me, and like collaborating on stuff like we did, writing back and forth, and you know, some of the, you know, songs, different things I gave you for, you know, the book thing that you were doing at the time, and just all of those different things. And it was a beautiful thing that had happened to me in that point in time in my life, and like the connections I made with the people there. And though some of those people aren't there and aren't here anymore, but like I really felt like I was a part of something bigger than me. And even though I still don't know exactly what that is, and like then some of the people that were in there with me, I was like, that guy's like straight out of a movie. You know, he's got to be like an agent. There, like
Yeah.
there's a plan here. He doesn't seem like he should be here. And then after leaving there, because I went back again a few months after, you know, Katie had left. I had went back again, and I ended up at the San Clemente facility later on. But some of the people that were put in there at that time, I really do believe that this guy was an agent, you know, like because it did get raided like right after I left there. So it was like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Did you want to ask him a question?
Oh
Like,
no, if you want to talk, go ahead. I'll wait.
oh no, it's fine. I was just gonna ask you, Daniel, like, do you remember our very first thing that you disclosed to me, like our first conversation with the journals? Do you remember what you wrote down? What we
uh,
talked about? So
I
the
don't.
first thing he put in my journal, this is why I feel like we were literally like telepathically all connected in some way. Like there was a grid between all the people there, and there was like people came from all over the country. Some people came from Puerto Rico, even like one guy, there's like one guy from Puerto Rico. Like it was
Mhm.
random, right? Like does this one place in Palm Desert. I used to joke around and say it's the real Area 51 over here. Um,
Yes.
but like Daniel, he sat down outside on a bench with me and he wrote in my journal 222, and then you wrote the reptilian agenda, and you gave me like a link and a website,
Oh,
and you started telling me about the reptilian agenda, and
mhm.
it was like syncing up to everything, you know. And mind you, at this time,
I
I'm going to
remember.
disclose something personal about myself that I haven't talked about publicly, I don't think. At this time, I was like sort of shape shifting. And I mean, not like, not in a, like, it was like my eyes were doing weird things. And Daniel saw it happen a lot. But like I had the like flickering thing where my eyes would look like slits, and a few people noticed it while I was there, and they'd say like your eyes look like cat eyes, or like they could see my eyes look like they had like cat eyes or reptile eyes or something. And I didn't know when it was happening, or that it was happening to me when it was happening. Um but it was happening, and it would happen when I would slip into this like alternate persona or some kind. And remember, so we're sitting in the center, and this is the day Daniel and I are passing the journal around, trying to control the room, like trying to like see if we could write something down and manipulate what the person who's at the speaker is doing and saying. So we were testing like our psychic powers, I guess, on the room while we're sitting there, and we're writing down like specific actions or statements that we wanted the person that was talking or speaking to do. And then we'd write it down and watch like a puppeteer watch this person then suddenly like start communicating about the the thing that we wrote down. And we thought it was like funny at first because we were like, did we really do that? Like, haha. And then we just kept doing it. And then it kept happening. And then Daniel looked over at me and he goes, your eyes. He's like, he's like, your eyes, like you're doing the thing. And I was like, oh, and like I didn't know that I was doing it. But my eyes were like doing this little reptile thing. Um, and I don't tell people that because it sounds like really weird to admit, and it sounds nefarious, and it makes me look like I'm probably like some weirdo or some reptilian hybrid of some kind. Um, and I don't know if it was a medication that caused that or if it was a natural quality that I had or have. But Daniel was the first person to actually like identify it and call me out on it. And then later, I had a house manager ask me the same thing when I was getting my medication one night, and I was like, "Oh, I think it's just the medication." Like I didn't know why my eyes were doing that. But anyway.
Did you want to add on to that, Daniel?
I remember now. I remember that, and I remember when that was happening too. And there was
Yeah.
times like when it was like that, you would tell me things, and where for one point, and I'll tell you this now, but I thought that like you were for sure like uh not an agent, but that you had, like you're saying, MK Ultra, because some of the stuff that you would tell me, like I don't want to say it really, but I mean like about your life, like that there was like, or can I say something, or like what
You
you
could
said?
say it. I'm
Like,
fine with it. Like,
well,
well,
like
if
you
it's
said that
really
you
bad,
had
we'll
like,
edit it.
well, like you said, you had like four sisters, that you thought you had four sisters that looked like you. And you told me that two of them lived on an island and they were like twins, and that you, and the other one was somewhere else. They all had red hair. And like there was something about your eyes, about all of your eyes, and like you didn't have contact with them, but that you were all part of a like something in a family, or either your I don't know if it was your husband's family, but you thought it was your ex-husband at the time, but it was connected. But it was like this whole thing. But then it was like really kind of choppy at the time when you would talk about. But you talked about it with me more on more than one occasion. Like you would tell me like bits of your information like that, and I was like,
Oh yeah. So I was
so
telling you about what happened to me right before I got to Sovereign. So when I was at the place they kicked me out, CRC, um, they told me, or there was like a nurse. I was getting like weird phone calls on my phone, and somebody was giving me like instructions on the phone while I was at CRC to go do this thing. They were like, write this down, and like they gave me some numbers, and I just remember just like in a trance writing down information that, and I don't know who it was that was on the other line, but I was getting information, and then right after that, a woman came into my room that was one of the nurses, and she was like, "Who are you on the phone with?" And I was, and something inside me was like, "I don't know." Like I just told her, I was like, "I don't know," but I didn't want to tell her what I was doing because I knew it was weird. Like I'm like getting information, writing stuff down. And then so I was like, "I don't know." And then she goes, "You weren't talking to a German, were you?" And I was like, how would you even know anything about me talking to a German? Because I thought that was just like a secret thing that I was doing on an app nobody else knew about. And I was like, no. And I just was like, I know. And then she goes, okay. And then she sits, shuts the door and she sits down. And then I remember this clear as day. I thought, is she trying to hypnotize me right now? Because she did this weird thing where she sat down and she looked at me in the eyes and was like, I have five, or she goes like something like, I have four sisters. Or she's telling me a story, but as she's doing it, she's like doing this thing and she's like, I have four sisters, and explaining to me like a weird random story about four sisters. And then it like activated something in my brain where I was like seeing like four different women positioned in different places across like the globe, and like I was synced up with like the knowing that there's like other women that like maybe look like me or have the same abilities as me, and I saw them. And like I connected with some of them actually online. They're like out there, but they don't look really like exactly like me, but we have similar caricatures and gifts. But she's telling me this thing and I'm like thinking, why does she first of all know about the German? And secondly, why is she trying to tell me a random story about four sisters? And it feels like she's trying to program something because my brain was like, whoa. And I was getting like weird stuff there too, like you are of the order of the Melchizedek. That was like, yeah, like something happened where like I got this I don't know what happened, but like something came through my phone. I got a lot of electronic interference on my phones, and then things would just like show up like you know like when a page just blows open. It was like that but on my phone, and it was like telling me like random stuff like you're of the order of the Melchizedek. And I was just like remembering that moment being dropping to my knees and being like, I'm not worthy. Like, God, I'm not worthy. And feeling like God, like there was a God component to all this madness. I just want to touch on this. This is where it began, where I was like, intrinsically, I felt like God had, like, I was God's child or I was like a chosen one or something. And like, I was on this crazy mystery of a mission to like do something big for mankind. Like I was here to like transmute all this darkness. That's what I really thought. Like I was taking on all this darkness to transmute it into light and to stabilize the frequency here on the planet. And of course, you know, to an average listener, that sounds like grandiose thinking. But for me, that was really what was in my heart. Like I really believe like maybe like God chose me to be here at this time on the planet, and that's why I'm going through all this stuff. So then I got like back to, you know, that was what happened. That's where the Four Sisters story came from. So I'm all scrambled after leaving the hospital in that one place. I go to Sovereign and I start just telling anyone who can listen what I've been through and what I know. And I found like it was like I was intuitively connected to certain people, like we were node points of one another. And like I would tell Daniel stuff and he like understood things I didn't know about myself, but he knew about by just hearing me talk. Like what other do you remember anything else besides the Four Sisters?
I'm trying to remember. Um, I I know that you were talking about the MK Ultra, that you thought that it had something to do with your ex-husband now with his family, and like almost that being like a not a I guess like an arranged type of a thing in the way in the background because of who he is and who his family was. And then it had to do something with some of the compounds and stuff where you thought that they were at, and that the guy, you know, because he was doing, you know, the contracting, basically military, you know, black ops type, you know, stuff like that, contracting. But I remember you telling me that much. And that's what I remember so far about you telling me that. And then I know it's hard for me to remember some of those things for some reason. I remember I have the notebooks, and about you handing them to me. I even have one. I'm gonna go home and dig it up and read it to you about what you wrote me, because it was talking
Yeah.
about the hospital, and you handed it to me. You said, "Does any of this mean anything to you?" So I started going through it and telling you what it meant and like what I thought it meant. But I still have that, but no, that's all I remember is at this moment in time. I know there's tons more though. There was so much about that, but it was like I want to add, it was like it was a weird thing too about this grandiose thing that I felt too, like I was, you know, gonna do something, whether it was in music or whatever it was. It was almost like these people could see my stars, or they could see like what my potential was, and they wanted to me to, like, another one was like, remember who you are. I kept like getting that, like, hey, like you're so close. Like these people would almost be like so frustrated with me because they're like, you're right there, and they would, you know, trying to get me to like whatever it was. I thought at any moment they were all going to come out with like, you know, the lights and the confetti's going to fall, and they're going to be like, you won the prize, or like you made it, or like some weird thing, like being groomed. Like, and I still think it was a grooming process throughout my life because of what I had seen and what I was learning, like the information that I was taking on. And I continued that research for, you know, it's been a decade now. And what I've gone into, and the most ironic thing about it is it led me right back to where I started. It was all about God, but I had to walk down the whole path all the way down, and, you know, be offered you know, that ultimate thing, you know, the lust of, you know. And I mean, I don't know if you want me to talk about that now, or I can talk about it later. We can go back. I'll jump around too much because I do. I don't mean to, but
We are
you know,
timeless. We go in and out of time.
We do.
because yeah, because I really want to say like all these things, or anybody who's listening to this will be like, you know, no matter what part of the path that you're on, and, you know, trying to figure out what your purpose and your destiny, what it is and why we're here, you know, why we're here on this planet. And like from my experience going through everything that I've gone through, all the, you know, the depression, the anxiety, the, you know, suicidal, the, you know, being, you know, a heroin addict, like 15 years old, you know, like going through all this horrible stuff and being completely just, you know, arrogant, ignorant, and just, I didn't know, you know, I didn't know better. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to be a person. I didn't know why everyone else seemed to be okay. And like, you know, there's so much, but now I have peace and quiet in my mind. I have a freedom that I've never had before. And it all came with God. Like I've always known that there was a God, was something. I always knew something was wrong or something wasn't right in the world. It wasn't supposed to be the way that it was. And now sitting from where I'm at with the eagle-eyed view, it all makes sense. It's all, two sides of the story, and it's good versus evil. And the quicker that people can humble themselves and also realize that, like, because where I was being pushed in, and it started to, like, in prison, and the things like, you are a god, you are the one with the power, or you was about self, and there's a part in you, in your heart, that it wants you to think you're special, wants you to think that, or all these things. And we all are important and special, and all have a purpose and a destiny. But it's a selfless thing. It's about other people, and about loving others the same way that you love yourself, about loving and recognizing that there is a higher power. There's a God that is above all, that created all and everything that you look at. People get caught up in worshiping, like it says, that they worship the creation rather than the creator. And it's, why not worship the one who made it all? Who is the giver of all good things. He can take your mess and turn it into a message in a moment. It's man, it gives me chills, because it's such a beautiful thing and a painful thing to look back and see all the things that I've been through, all the hurt, all the pain I caused, losing, my children in my life, the selfish mistakes that I made, the time I'll never get back, but I'll never change any of it, because, I messed myself up just perfectly, just perfectly. I'm at the point where I know I'm on the brink of my purpose, and what my purpose and destiny is, and it is to help set the captives free. I feel that with everything in me, to be who God created me to be and called me to be, is my only purpose. And now that I have the vision that I can see, like, being offered, a deal with the devil, and it doesn't really matter who it came through. Like, when people say that, like in a testimony, when they go, well, it doesn't really matter the person or the thing, because it wasn't the person, there was entities, in that person. And it was because they had made a deal. They were, at early time in their life, when they were young, were taken up by, in like a UFO type thing, and told that they were special, given innate knowledge of music and all this stuff, and came back, and they decided to do something, in that time. But at the very end of all this, and going through everything I went through with Sovereign, and going back to what I was doing, pursuing music, and at the end of it, being offered, a deal, and having somebody do something, basically, and, like, take right out of my mind and play the music that I was playing in my head to a rhythm that they were playing. And he was playing the lead, and he played all of it just the way I was doing it in my mind. And he winked at me and said, you could do it too. And I said, what? And he's like, you know what? He's like, the music. He's like, that's one of the things I can do. I can play your song, anybody's song, this, that. Like, started telling me, he said, I made a deal. He said, I didn't sell my soul, but I made a deal with the devil. And he said, it came with this, came with me, with, you could have any woman you want, with money, with fame, how the whole thing, the way his whole, kind of thing went down. And, like, and it's not, this person now has come to God. He was saved and pulled out of the fire, like, just the same way I was, along with 8 of us, all of us in different places and times. And, we all humbled ourselves and prayed, and in truth and sincerity, in our own place, in a different period of our walk. And he came, and he set us free and showed us who he was, like, in a way that I could never deny. And I prayed, and I asked that, and I went, and I thought it was BS. I was like, prove me wrong. I'll do all what it says, do whatever. Like, after that happened to me, and I knew that it broke my heart, because I loved this person so much. And, like, I would talk to these beings, these things in them. I knew that they were there, but I thought it was like something else. I thought it was like, oh, the Nordics, this, that, they're good beings. And I was on this whole other thing, and thought that, I am a God, and I sure as well am not God in any way, shape, or form. Anytime I try to control anything in my life, I get it doesn't work out. But when I surrender it, like, I win by my battles through surrender. And but, like, having that happen to me, it threw me into a place to where I was, like, so depressed. I was in a parking lot wanting to kill myself, and realized I had no God to pray to, didn't know where I was going to go, had nothing left. I'd held on to God by a string. And I left that situation, and as God would have it, I ended up working at a hotel, and there was a little church people there. It was actually just their family. It was like 8 people. And they would go there and rent the conference room every week, and they would show up and they'd go in there and they'd pray. And I mean, it was a Pentecostal type thing, but so they were super like about the spirit. But I went in there and I tried it and started doing it, but it wasn't even through a denomination or through anything. But they showed me that there is a God, a God that loves me, who's there for me, that I can go right up into the throne room of God, and he's right there for me if I seek him. And I did it, and he showed up to me just in the same way like the devil revealed himself to me, and after that happened, it changed my life forever. I've never been the same since. And I would never want to live my life without God. I'm so grateful, like that, to I could feel the grace and the mercy of God when I can feel it, just like in the love, the undying love. And that it's a guidance, and like everything here, it all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Like anything that's truly gained is like relationships, like with what me and you have, Katie, with what me and my significant other have, with my children. Those are the true gifts. Those are the true treasures. Everything else is going to turn to dust. It's all going to disappear and go. So like having found the giver of all good things, and being blessed enough to be able to share that and be on the other side of things, and be like involved in different ways and trying to help other people. And that's just my drive now. But like, and I'll tell you one last thing about that. Like, after I got offered that deal, I was alone. I said no, this and that, and he doesn't even remember those things. But every time that thing would come, it would, because the agreement, that thing could pop in and out like an Agent Smith. He
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
remember a lot of those things that
Yeah.
he was telling me. But like, he told me things I was doing that nobody would know. I was by myself. I've had light bulbs break and shatter above me, different things going on, I mean, knowing things. But it was because you make pacts and things with other entities that can go wherever they want. They're outside of space and time. And it's just the truth and the reality of what it is, no matter how hard it seems to I mean, embrace that, because it was hard for me to embrace it. But so I was sitting in my house writing a song, and it was actually, the name of the song was called Towers of Babel Fallen, and it was about that guy, about my brother. And this thing came into me and was playing music through me. And when it happened, it was the most lustful thing I ever felt in my life. Like, it was like the most completely like and euphoria type of a thing. Like, you can have this. But at the same exact moment, it was the most terrifying thing I've ever felt in my life. And it wasn't a fear of like, being hurt, or like if someone could have like cut me into a million pieces at that moment, and it wouldn't have mattered, because the fear I had was, I knew that my soul was at stake. Like, I knew that if I made that decision, that I would be stepping into a place where it was like, but my soul was at stake. And to this day, I still fight that off. Like, I don't want anything to do, but like, the devil ain't got nothing better to do than come knock on my door and be like, hey, you can have this, do that, whatever. And I'm like, no, I'll lay in the dirt and be broke and eat, locusts and honey. Just, I rebuke you, Satan. I'm paid for by the blood of Jesus Christ. But anyway, we can move on. But I wanted to say that. So,
Thank you for
and I
sharing.
hope that people can relate to that, because, whatever walk that they're in or step that they're in, because, it's, there's a truth, and the truth will set you free.
Absolutely. One of the things that I wanted to ask you both, going back to gate, I don't know if that was something that you guys were consciously thinking of, because I know there was a lot going on in your life. You guys were there. Did you guys have conversations with people? Was there a pattern of, did you hear people talk about MK Ultra? Did you hear them talk about, oh, we were in the gifted and talented programs? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Um, yeah, a lot of people were gifted. One of my friends that I made there, his name was Austin, and he was a child prodigy. He knew how to he was a genius with music like Daniel as well. And he was like a cello artist as well, and he taught cello to people. And Austin told me about his childhood and his upbringing, and he had this he was a twin, and he had a brilliant mind, but he suffered a lot of abuse as a child. And he, consequently struggled a lot with his own like perception of himself because of that. Like he was so smart and so talented, but also like so tortured. And he was a gifted student. Like, and then there was pretty much everyone I met was a gifted student. The girls I lived with were all gifted. I lived with this like 20-year-old savant who was like a chemist, like she knew biochemical engineering and stuff. And I lived with like just all these different gifted kids that were GATE students, or they were whatever GATE tag. Um, and so I was really attuned to patterns at this time as well. So like I was patterning out like the types of people and what houses they put them in. And I was like, oh, that group of girls all had this type of situation, and this type of girl, these are like the, nerds over here. Here's like the beta kittens over here. Like you could see where each person's programming fit into a box if you knew anything about MK Ultra and or Monarch programming rather, and you understand like the different types of programs they can install. It was really easy to identify which programs were in which houses, like who had what, and like yeah, so there's that. And yeah, like just to circle back to the gifted thing, I don't think there was one person there that wasn't gifted. They all had significant gifts, not just like, "Oh, you're cool. You're a great poet." It was like, "No, you're a genius. You have like they were they were all very talented, but on a different spectrum. Like some were writers, some were mathematicians. We had art directors, we had screenwriters, people, but their genius went outside of just their creations and what they could manifest. It was like they were all multidimensional thinkers. And I don't know if that's the nature of being a drug addict in general, if you're just like multidimensional before or after. But but everyone was multi-D. Everybody could see things outside of the spectrum that we were in front of. And I think that's why we all synced up so quickly, because everyone's frequency band was like running on its other level. And we just like found each other, our little waveforms all interacted together in this beautiful little dance of, whatever it was. I wanted to circle back, if you don't mind, unless you have a question you wanted to ask really quick,
Go
Emma.
ahead.
I wanted to talk about faith, and that since you brought it up, Daniel, and I had a very different faith journey. One where I was, raised Christian, and yet like all of my experiences took my brain into like a place where everything I knew and believed was not the way I was taught. And I'll be honest with you, I never really believed the Bible or believed in the version of the story that I was told the way it was told to me. The way that God and Jesus was presented to me, just I could see the hypocrisy in a lot of like the environment I was in and the teachings, and they just seemed like I used to tell my parents, like, I think the Bible's missing some pages. Like, it's not all here. The story's not all here. But like, so I struggled even more with my faith, even though I had like all these like supernatural experiences, like demonic encounters when I was a child. And like, and I cried out to Jesus, and Jesus always like took me in, freed me from whatever was trying to bind to me at the time, because as a child, that's what I knew to do, and it worked. But then like as I got older and I went down the road of knowledge and learning, and then I started to have these other awakenings, like with extraterrestrial encounters and stuff. My faith really got like rocked into a different dimension where I no longer believed that I was fully human. And I started to consider the fact that maybe I was a hybrid and that I came from somewhere else and that I'm just having this human experience here. And so I started to really like resonate with the Pleiadians and at the time, and like I felt like they were my actual family, and that's where I was really from. And I felt like where does Jesus fit in here? Like where does Jesus fit in now that I believe I'm a Pleiadian or a descendant or and like somehow like my consciousness and my DNA, I feel like is synced up with the Pleiadian tribe. How can I like be a Christian if I believe that I'm an extraterrestrial hybrid, And so I struggled so much with like existential, like, how do I express myself here in this human construct that I am with all this extraterrestrial knowledge and awareness? Like, who am I and how do I become like a self-expressed essentially? And so I struggled really hard with trying to fit into a category that was acceptable to society and to be able to articulate myself. I struggled because I had a lot of Luciferian programming and I didn't know it at the time, but the people that I was with at Sovereign, my good friends who are really intelligent, pointed out that a lot of my programming was Luciferian that I had believed in and the things I knew. And I was like, what? I'm like, what do you mean I'm Luciferian? Like, I'm just a scientific, smart, free-spirited girl. I don't know. And but I was very indoctrinated and I had gone through a lot of like occult initiations. I had gone through the Rosicrucian Mystery School. I had like Masonic, programming for sure. I had Masons all around me all the time, but I was also very interested in understanding what they were about. And so for me to try to have faith in a higher power, it was like not the way that I didn't know how to have faith in anything because I had this understanding that like whatever I thought was like God or Jesus or like the plan isn't actually the plan. And it wasn't what like that was my experience. And then when I saw this whole, you are the order of the Melchizedek or whatever, I was like, something registered in me like that was a truth. And I started to believe like and it started to piece together this story in my head that like I was from a bloodline maybe that was related to Christ, and that this particular experience in my human form, that doesn't mean that I can't also be a descendant of an extraterrestrial race because the God of all creation surely didn't just make us and these little humans that are having this little experience on this little planet so I thought I can believe that there's both things at the same time. I can believe that perhaps I volunteered to come here. And I mean, this is part of my story too. It's like I had this feeling that it felt so true to me, like in my spirit, and it gave me peace too about all this craziness that maybe I volunteered to be here at this time. And maybe I took on all these crazy experiences and I did all this dark, like underworld sort of exploration so I could integrate a higher thing for what was happening on the planet. I could take all this darkness and transmute something or at least bring something to light that would help humanity. And so that story is the one that I told myself that felt right and that I lived with in order to survive a lot of my trauma and to survive a lot of the just unexpected anomalies. I was like, I'm an alien hybrid sent here from God to help humanity. And I believe that because that feels right. And that seems like a good enough story to live by. So I don't go want to kill myself because everything else here is pretty dark. And so I just want to say, like, I want to touch on the fact that my journey wasn't as easy to come back to like Christ and to that Christ awareness because I was so uh I'm not religious. I'm not a religious person. I can't be religious as much as I wish I could be simple and just stick to one thing. I can't. Like I can't, but I can see everything from like this bigger grander picture, and I'd like to believe that there is a design where gifted and talented people came into the planet. They were coined gifted and talented humans, but they were really just people that have extra special, maybe divine inheritance that they came in with. Maybe they were God's people, the chosen ones, or maybe they were volunteers that came here to help humanity while it's in the turmoil that it's in. Like we came in at a very specific time on the planet for a very specific operation, and that we are the ultimate black op to help like save humanity. And so that was like really what I believed, and that's what got me through when I was at Sovereign and I was over there just like I know what's happening. I could feel it all and like into it where everybody's ascension levels were. And I was like seeing all the different women that were getting activations. And I was like, it's okay. You're going to be, this is what happens. Like I understood their physiological changes. I would help like, I was basically deprogramming people that were there myself. I was doing like the unpacking and like explaining to them what was happening to them. Like this fifth dimensional version of me took over while I was at Sovereign, and I felt very in tune with my spirit and my alien self. And then I also was apparently in tune with my nefarious aspects as well. Like I want to say like humans, real organic humans, we are multi-layered, we are multi-dimensional, and we are like a vehicle and something, if you're not like conscious about yourself, or if you're like disassociated, or if you're on like substances, you can leave like these holes in your aura. And it's like leaving like the keys on the seat in the car unlocked, and anything can walk in and like drive you and like take over. So like we see demonic, like Daniel and I both had seen a lot of walk-ins in our lives, and it happened at Sovereign too, where people who are like human vessels, just these entities will walk in, and we have these conversations with these other aspects of either ourselves or other entities that were walking in. And so I know that's probably a little out of left field. We weren't sure we were going to go there, but we did. So
No, thank you both. I love how like you both have such different ways to where you got to where you are and such different backgrounds,
yeah,
but you're so connected at like your core of what means a lot to both of you
yeah,
that you can come together despite any differences that you guys have in how you see the world. You know, we have such a problem these days where if like somebody doesn't think exactly like you, like people cast everybody off. There's so much division. When I think at our core, if we were to put everybody in, you know, these rooms together and you don't know anything about people before they come in, if we all had an
yeah,
experience like what you guys did, where you're just all put into a room, we'd all connect over what we have in common. Like we wouldn't be thinking the first things that we talk about with each other wouldn't be like, oh, well, what political side are you or what religion are you? Like we would connect over these really deep things. And you guys both like your testament and your testimony and how, you know, all these people came together and all these different people, all walks of life, different gifts,
yeah,
different talents, different careers, yet you all like bonded together over these core morals that you all had in common and like these extrasensory perceptions almost that you have of the world. You know, so I really love hearing both of that because there are people that like automatically connect, which is really beautiful, with a specific religion or a specific path, and then there's other people that either struggle along the way or collect a bunch of ideas that work really well for them. You know, and I think like both are really beautiful and that we should be more compassionate and like open-minded to that and realize that, you know, we have so much more in common than not. You know, so thank you both for sharing that path because there's, you know, even just on my podcast alone, there's so many. I've had people that just don't believe at all, people that are very like staunch Christian and like everything in between, you know, and I think that there's like really cool stories behind how we all sort of come to where we're at. And we can all learn from each other, you know. So thank you both for sharing. I wanted to start talking about your transition out. I could talk to you guys for hours and hours about your experiences in there. And maybe we can actually do that. I'm sure people will have questions. Maybe we could even do another show where we talk about that. But I want to talk about your transition out of here, and then let's get into what happened to Sovereign and why it's no longer a facility anymore.
okay. So for me, like I left first.
How long were you there?
I was there for 60 days.
Okay.
I was there for 60 days, which was short compared to most people. And I fought them because I thought I only had to be there for 30 days because that's what it was told it was just a 30-day program. But then they were like, no. And I kept feeling like they were like keeping me for reasons that were not like, it didn't make sense. And I felt like they were studying me instead of actually like trying to like, I don't know. It just felt there was a lot of control. And I was very anti-authoritarian. So I ordered a pizza one night. This is how I didn't know like we were under tight lock and key. I ordered a pizza one night to the house that we were at. Like I said, we were living in the country club suburbs, so I didn't think it was a big deal to order a pizza. And the fact that a pizza man even came to our door was like a red alert, like security breach, I guess. And I didn't know that. And so because I broke like a security protocol, they needed to take my phone from me. And I felt really like entrapped at times there. Like I like was powerless. Like they could choose my fate, whether I lived there forever or I like got to go home. And I was mad. Like I started getting really mad because my intuitive senses were like super spiked and I could see the whole situation going on and like the drugs and like I was like over there feeling like an investigative journalist. So I was like taking notes on like what pills did you get prescribed today and like asking people questions and patterning out and like drawing my own like murder board in my head of what's happening. And so when I started calling it out and I started fighting back against it, and I was like, you need to discharge me. And they made all these stupid excuses. I threatened to like expose them as well, like Daniel. And I was like, I'm an investigative journalist and I'm going to expose everything on Facebook. And I was just because I had like a lot of people watching me on Facebook at that time. And I just threatened them in like so many ways. I think that's another reason why they took my phone from me because they didn't trust me. I was a wild card. But yeah, so that happened and then like I had to fight and I had to make them make it make sense why they would keep me and they tried to tell me, "Oh, well, we have to wait till they process something in the billing department first and it's in India." And I was just like, I don't like care what you're talking about. Like, I don't care what you have to process in the billing department. I want to leave. And so that was a battle to get out and I had to threaten, I had to act smarter than them. I also like had, a lot of triggers go off at the end there where like they punished me a lot because I wasn't going with the program like other people did. Daniel was a good boy, I think. I was not, and like I was getting punished for everything, for all my like non-compliance or anti-authoritarian behavior. Um, we were at a field trip I remember it was like Memorial Day, and so this is relevant. I think you remember this story, like, there was a girl that was my roommate. She was younger than me, like, she's only 19-year-old girl. And she and Kenji like had a crush on each other and they were holding hands at this like little field trip they had us on. And there was a strict like no fraternization rule, even though people were doing like way worse things than holding hands there. And this program leader decided to like announce in front of the entire group, in front of like all the men and the women, like publicly slut shamed this young girl. And I don't know what happened, but it like triggered this other aspect of my personality that went totally dark by seeing another woman get shamed publicly. I like went into like this very aggressive blackout where I challenged the leader and I said, "You can't shame her like that in front of all these people." And then the leader told me in front of everybody, she said, "She shamed herself." And I was like, I snapped at that moment and I was like trying to attack, like punch and take down this leader. And I'm not an aggressive person. I'm really not. I'm actually like pretty passive when it comes to like violence, but something in my personality activated at that moment, which was like, must take her out and like take down all the people trying to shame. So I'm like a huge trigger for me was shame and slut shaming. And so that got me in trouble too, because I was like obviously trying to take down like a program leader. And I wanted to take down the whole operation. Once I found a journal in my house, another girl had left and I opened her journal up and I read her journal and right in the it said, "This place is a racket, get out." That was what it said on the journal. And I was like, what do you mean? And then we started to think maybe they're holding us here to either like experiment on us, observe us, or rack up a bill because they were doing something. we all thought the FBI was in our phones when we got there too. Every single person there was like, oh yeah, the feds are tracking me. But of course, that sounds crazy to say, right? But turns out they actually were. Um, Later on, like we found out after I had been telling my family, I swear the FBI is there. They're tracking things. There's there's feds that are pretending to be patients there. And like, because people were giving me weird information, like they were feds there. And then I just sensed that some people didn't fit in that were like pretending to be patients. And of
Mm.
course, you get people like us that say stuff like that, and nobody believes you. They think like, oh yeah, delusions of grandeur again. But no, a year later, come to find out, Sovereign Health was raided by the FBI, and they came with a sealed warrant, and nobody knew exactly what they were looking for when they came in, but they came in like full team and like did the full like raid, and everybody was like, what's going on? Like nobody knew why they were raiding, but then the rest of us who found out were like, so um we don't know officially what they were looking for, but we do know that there was like allegations of like insurance fraud and racketeering in that way, that respect. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, so like Sovereign Health was definitely rated. Here, you want to read it? Oh,
Sorry, let me unmute my screen. Yep, I can read this. I'll read a little bit for people. So, especially for those of you who are just listening on Spotify or iTunes, Katie sent me some helpful articles. This one, FBI raids Sovereign Health rehab chain sites across Southern California. Federal and state agents raided several locations Tuesday of the Southern California rehab company Sovereign Health as part of an ongoing probe, authorities said. No arrests were made when officials executed search warrants at sites in Culver City, Palm Desert, San Clemente, and San Juan Capistrano, FBI spokeswoman Laura something said. The search warrants were filed under seal, and officials were barred from discussing the extent of the investigation. So that is pretty interesting too, that there wasn't even the officials were barred from discussing the investigation.
yeah. So like my intuitive sense was this was multifactorial, like that they knew that they were doing some sort of possible like racketeering with insurance because they were keeping people for a long time. My parents actually saw like my insurance bill and they were like, "Did you have all this lab work done?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't have any lab work done when I was there. I didn't." And they were like, "Well, they charge for all this stuff." And I'm like, "They did not do regular lab work on me. I promise you that. Like, I did not get blood work done on myself." So like there was a lot of like little weird red flags like that my parents saw, but a lot of people we come to find out like it was if you had. And then here's the other thing, like, okay, so this foundation, I don't know, Daniel, if you could speak on this, but did they like put you on an insurance plan or buy you an insurance plan when they recruited you in? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. And they somehow, whoever the person was, the anonymous donor, they paid for all my insurance. They were trying to get me to stay there for a year and said that they would pay for me to stay longer, and then to go to a sober living after the fact. And like, uh, yeah, they were like saying the insurance will pay for everything for up to
Yeah,
6 months. I'm not sure how, but I did have some type of insurance that
yeah,
I did. Yeah, it was like that.
yeah.
And then
What else was I?
no,
Go
one
ahead.
of the things that I wanted to just comment on, I mentioned it in the intro, but one of the other details that I thought was interesting, in San Juan Capistrano, officials also searched a private residence along Silverleaf Drive, the same street where Sovereign CEO Tanmoy Sharma lives. So that's pretty interesting also.
Yeah. This guy, well, as you can see here, like he actually, I think it's worth mentioning, and I'm sorry, like I'm not throwing this guy under the bus. I didn't know him, but I just wanted, this is a public record here. Like this guy's medical license was revoked. Sharma, the one who was the CEO, he had his medical license revoked by Britain's General Medical Council in 2008 for serious professional misconduct. A panel found that he claimed to have had a doctorate, but he had not completed his degree, and that he undertook unethical research practices involving human subjects, and that he showed a serious disregard for established ethical procedures and practice. So this guy got kicked out of the UK. I think he was doing stuff in the UK first, and then he came over to the US and had like all these different like places set up, not just in California, but like in other places, other states. So I happen to believe he wasn't working alone. I don't think this guy, like, I almost wondered too if he was just like a front man for something. Because I don't think this one, like, if you saw him and you hear him, he's like, he seems like a guy who maybe had like one time a good idea for how to like help integrate these people that using like different alternative methods. But like whatever was behind, sorry, there's an ambulance going by here. Whatever was behind the whole sovereign racket, it was bigger than him, because we had like people doing like interviews behind, the other side of the wall. They didn't want to be seen or heard. Special sponsors. Uh, there's just a lot of interesting kind of like questionable aspects to the why the FBI would be looking. And I mean, if I'm going to be honest, like, I'm sure that they were more interested in the files and the records of the subjects there than they were in the insurance fraud situation.
That's what I was thinking was, if this was especially something that he was sort of doing behind the scenes with other people who were helping under the guise of, treatment, rehabilitation, detoxification, those types of things. And the government found out, like, why wouldn't they want access to the information that was potentially being collected here? It makes a lot of sense to me that, and especially because none of these articles share really anything, just that there was an investigation, but it doesn't share like what they found. It's saying that, even the investigators weren't allowed to talk about it. So I think that it leaves a lot to be desired when you think about what was going on here.
A lot to the imagination.
There you go. Do you
Yeah.
want to add anything onto that, Daniel?
Um, yeah, I'll just say it was, yeah, like trying to get out of there was the same thing with me. Like I had to, I basically whipped out a card out of my wallet from an old attorney and was like, I got the, second best attorney in New Mexico. And like, if you don't get me out of here by this and this date, like you guys agreed to when I first flew out here, then I'm going to blow everything out of the water. I know what you guys are doing. It's all about the scam, about how much money you guys are getting every month for us. It was like 30
Yeah.
something $1,000, whatever they were charging. But like, so I ended up leaving like 45 days. I think they got me to stay for 45 days. They flew me back out. And then the second time I went back there, they flew me out within like, it was like 2 days or something like that. They had me on a plane back. And I stayed for, I think, 4 months that time. And they were really trying to push me to stay. But it was something, I mean, the guy Sharma, when they were talking about him, like my addiction team or whatever, all the people I had working on my team, they would talk really highly of him, or about his ideas and about what he was trying to do, even though they never really said exactly what it was that what he was doing, but like saying he was brilliant. I remember my main he was a neurologist too and a psychiatrist, but he was the one who spoke really highly of him and about his ideas. And they were really just pushing the whole, like, I keep going back to it, but the whole mapping your brain thing, and like the frequencies, like hitting your mind, your mind with frequencies, different things that they were talking about though. But just how pushy they were on it, because they brought it up to me probably like 10 times while I was there. They're like, I mean, different people would come up and try to, get me or convince me to do it. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. No, like, It just
Yeah.
seemed really, but anyway, that's all. I mean, it was basically everything Katie just said.
Yeah.
What
The
else do you
drug.
guys want to add on to? Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, it was interesting how, like, I don't even remember the name of the drug that I was on, but it was like a medication I've never heard of. And I worked in healthcare for 10 years. So I knew like every SSRI, every type of like antipsychotic. I knew like pharmacology. So I was familiar with a lot of drugs on the market. I knew pharmaceutical reps every day came into my office. So this was a drug I had never heard of and never knew of. And I remember him being like, if you take this, you'll never want to use meth again. You'll never use this again if you take this. And it did something to me. I remember like it had a norepinephrine rehab. There was part of it was a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor in there, but it I still wonder sometimes if like they were trying to keep me in this state where I would like get that reptilian sort of eyes and reptilian activated mind, like where I was doing stuff like frequency manipulation and things like that, because the drug that they put me on, after he put me on that, that's when like my eyes started doing that thing again and they started I started glitching. So
That's
I don't know.
interesting. That's a
Yeah.
really I've heard of things like that happening to other
Yeah.
people. And so I'm really happy that you talked about it because I don't think it's talked about enough. And I think a lot of people harbor these things that they're sort of scared to talk about because they feel like it's weird. And I think that's another thing that, survivors that have gone through things like you have, Katie, have experienced, whether it was in a program after, and it's very validating to hear that, you've had these experiences too. So I really appreciate you talking about, these aspects that you haven't shared before. Thank you for sharing it on here.
Yeah. No problem.
And what else do you guys want to add anything else about Sovereign, about the investigation, about how it impacted you after? I'd love to open up the floor to anything that wasn't discussed yet, if you guys had anything on your list or on your mind.
Let's see. I think that's, the way that it's sovereign, it did affect me, after the fact. It helped me it really helped me kind of seeing that I wasn't alone, after the fact. Like when I did fall back off the wagon and started doing what I was doing, I still felt like I had like people that I could reach out to and talk to that would like bring me back and ground me. Like I was able to like get a hold of Katie. Like you knew when I was in the studio and sending you stuff there, and like where I was at that point in time. And she was able to help me keep me grounded when I was way, way off, on that. So it did benefit me in many ways and gave me the time I needed, like to heal inside of myself, no matter what was going on or what their true intentions were. It did offer me a place to like be able to reflect and kind of integrate a lot of the information that I had, to have some type of a place to where I could stand on some type of solid footing, and so to speak. And it also, uh, it helped me, like when somebody said to me, when he told me that, sometimes an angel's got to take one for the team, and just let it go. Like when he said that to me, because the way he said it, he was like, he knew, like he could feel everything in me, and he was like, hey, stop, and said it to me. And whatever that means, like, it says God has formed and fashioned us and shaped us in the womb we known him before the foundations of the earth even were. Like, we don't know exactly, maybe we're not supposed to know, and that veil's there for a reason, and the things that happen all happen in his perfect timing. But you know also being tested and by people or whoever there, and I think a lot of it was spiritual components too, operating through people,
Yeah.
both sides or whatever. And um it helped me to kind of see, to distinguish between the two, and kind of be in a place where um I didn't have to quite believe in either one. I just knew both existed, and I was never a true hard, I never was raised in Christianity or any of that. I just knew that there was God. I knew that there was evil because I was attacked as a child, at a young age. I had demons, demonic stuff happened to me through all my childhood. I mean, tormented bad, and like, then stuff being done to me, witchcraft, like crazy things happened, like when just in my teenage years. And then like, I was being hit from the very beginning, like anything that could happen to knock me off my purpose and destiny. But all it did was, made me wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove, to be able to see and be able to have that, and to feel just for a moment of what you could have, and to refuse it, and to let it go. And then that moment, I knew, if this is real, then there's got to be the other side. And that's when I went running back. And I was like, okay, you say this book, then fine. Because I thought like, oh yeah, there's no way, but like my own belief, my own stuff, just testing things, going outside. I don't believe in religion either. It's not a religion for me. It's a belief in a relationship with God, and with, I believe, of course, in Christ, and that's what I believe wholeheartedly is true. But it's not in the way, in the shape, and the form that it was presented to me, because I've always gone into churches, gone into places that I've found, not trying to find fault, because they're hospitals for sick people. That's where people go, that they need help. We all need help. We're all sick. We're all skewed in one form, fashion, or shape or another. And the devil's done a great job of dividing, the people of God. But it doesn't matter, because the people that have been chosen are going to be brought together. The remnant is brought together, and it's many people. It was a mixed multitude that was pulled out of Egypt. It's everybody coming from everywhere together, no matter where we're at. Doesn't matter what church. Doesn't matter if you're, swinging from a chandelier with Rihanna right now, and you're going to become a god soon, because they're going to give you your little Masonic button or whatever you're going to get. Whatever it is people are aspiring to be, God will pull you out of wherever and put you right where you need to be, and his people will be brought together, and his will be done. And like the people that are here for that reason, that purpose, like is within us, that drive and pull to help, to give back, that love, it's gonna shine through, and it's gonna overpower the wickedness, no matter what it looks like. So it's like, I don't know. I know that's what I wanted to add. I got jumped way off topic, but
No, you didn't.
That was
I'll
great.
circle it back in. I know where you're going with this.
I text preach Katie all the time on accident.
Yeah. We're so different. We come from so many like the other plane. Like if we came from two factions, like I probably like come from the dark divine feminine, and he's like this light, and then we came together, and it was just like this alchemy of healing and integration of all these different parts of ourselves. But what I wanted to say is, first of all, the angel guy who talks about angels, I'm wondering if it's the same guy who talked to me. Um, so this guy came up to me there and was like, God sends his spies in battalions. And he told me this, like, he's like, he said something like, trouble comes, and like he was like kind of speaking like in a riddle or something to me about like Satan coming and trouble's brewing, and God sends in spies and battalions, and he said God gives his toughest battles to his best soldiers. And he said that to me as well. And so I was just like, all right, like, and that was just how it was there. Like people came to you with these like things, or they'd write stuff like that in your journal to you. Um, and so what I wanted to say, like to close out about sovereign, and like something important to say is we only recently found out that we lost two of our friends over the last couple years since 2020, since the pandemic. Two of our good friends that we met, they're like soul brothers, are no longer with us, and one of them's Kenji and the other one's Austin. Um, and I just want to say a couple words on both of them. Like Kenji and Austin were both musicians. They were both creatives. They both had knowledge of things that went beyond this dimension of reality. They both were extremely, extremely powerful, but also extremely tortured emotionally. And they struggled with their mental health at times. And they really like vacillated between wanting to deeply like do service. Like Austin wanted to be he said he wanted to be a pediatric oncologist, and I was like, wow, that's a heavy one, Austin. But he felt like that was what he was supposed to do, is like give back and like take on some of the hardest things. Like we all have felt like we're supposed to take on these hard things in order to like brighten up this planet. And Kenji, he was no different. Like, he came from a really rough background too, and like he lost his mother as well. And Kenji was like convinced I was a federal agent the whole time we were there, even though we were like buddies. And if I was, I didn't know it, guys, okay? Um but like he was also like just brilliant. And these guys were in Rock to Recovery. We were all of us were in Rock to Recovery together, and we all created that poem, The Collective Conscious Experiment, that I read at the last the Gate one that we did podcast. And I just want to say, like, they are a fragmented piece of the picture of who we are. And each of their stories tells a collective story about all of us that were there at Sovereign. And their lives mattered, whether they knew it or not, whether they knew how big their impact that they would have on others would be. I only knew them for a blip of time. We spent 60 days together in the desert, but they stayed my friend outside, on the outside, and we were there with each other through other hard times. We like held each other up, we encouraged one another, and oftentimes had to call one another out on our crap. But it was I just want to say that mental health and substance abuse and brilliance, like intelligence, giftedness, sometimes go hand in hand. And the next time somebody has like a family member or a friend, or they know somebody that's struggling with their mental health, or maybe struggling with substance abuse, or maybe has like, just doesn't seem like they are like a normal member of society, they're a little divergent in their thinking. I think that we all need to like take a pause on our judgments and remember that like a lot of people are layered with different parts of themselves. There's more than just the present person that we present as on the outside. And if this world had more compassion and more willingness to actually like hear one another, we would actually find out that we are all very much more alike than we're different. And so on that note, I just want to say, like, rest in peace to Kenji and Austin, and to anyone who's lost a loved one to mental health or addiction or a freak accident. Um, like, our hearts are with you, and you're not alone. And if you're still struggling with your mental health or addiction, um, I just want you to know, like, that there is a God. Whether it's a God of your own understanding, there is a higher power, a higher guidance system out here that is going to be able to pull you out of the trenches. And, it just takes like that little tiny bit of yourself to actually trust that there is something better than all the shit that you've experienced. It's on the other side.
And I wanna say too that it's really beautiful that you talked about them in this positive light, because like I said, I think when outsiders see somebody struggling and they don't know the backstory or what somebody went through in their life to like get them to that rock bottom or make them desire to shift their consciousness to, say drinking or use
Hmm.
substance to be able to cope with whatever it is that they're going through. We are very quick to judge, and when we hear about somebody who maybe takes their life or loses their life or overdoses, we sort of look down on that person and are like, oh well, they made a bad choice and they did this and they should have never started drinking, and their life doesn't really get honored the way that it should be. And looking at, gosh, how sad it is that somebody was driven to the point where they felt so misunderstood because society just writes people off, that like that was their only option. And so I really love that you painted them in a light that shows like their gifts and their talents and their brilliance, because it's really beautiful. It like brings me to tears thinking about it, how like misunderstood some people are, like you said, like the misfits,
Yeah.
and it's like you might feel good like in this compartmentalized like situation with like-minded people, but it's just like, what you hear about with the military, people get then try to reintegrate in the real world.
Hmm.
Be a really big struggle because not everybody looks at people in the compassionate way that you and Daniel do. So thank you for, for sharing that about them. That's really beautiful and very, very sad, to think about, people who had so much to give and, weren't able to follow through with it, but to also see like the tremendous impact that they had while they were here, and in how such a short period of time, like we all have that capability where we can make that impact, whether it's a moment with somebody, whether it's 30 days, 60 days, whether it's a lifetime, like that's a gift that we can all give, is to say like, how can I,
Yeah.
positively impact the people here so their memories of me and, what they take is something positive. Um, and Daniel, did you want to add anything on to what Katie was saying about your friends? I wanted to make sure that we gave you a chance to.
Yes. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. My phone just died, so I had to jump on my computer.
No
No
worries.
worries.
So, but yeah, I just wanted to say, when you're dealing with addiction, when you're dealing with, things like that, you know, uh, mental instability and just, waking up to the things that are around you, life can be hard. And like losing those people, at Sovereign, like I know that they were fighters too. And they didn't, they were trying to be able to exist in this world and find their place and their purpose, and whatever means happened, they were taken, from us and out of this world. I mean, and it's happened, a year ago. The mother of my son, she OD'd a year ago. She went, and it's just horrible. It doesn't, it doesn't matter, what color you are. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what background. There is something out that's that can take you down. And I just want to say, I want to say rest in peace for those people and for their families. And um, to know that there's people out here, there's always hope, no matter what is, we lose here on this plane. That the light is going to shine, and we have to be that light and shine for those people that aren't here anymore. And be the light, show the love, and have a message, of how to get out of it, and a place to go, and know that you're not alone, no matter how crazy you might feel, no matter how much and how reality, seems, whatever it is, just hold on to hope and don't ever let go. I mean, and that's all I'll say.
And that
Well
does give
said.
people hope. That's, we all struggle with that to some degree of like feeling different whenever you're like awakened to things, or whenever you kind of like break out of the matrix. Like it is really hard to like integrate into the world and like wear those masks again and go to work and like be somebody that, isn't really authentic to who we might be here, or, whenever you're not wearing those labels and you can just take them off, and so it's really refreshing just to like, if we all had that compassion towards people, I think, and we all like open up our arms to people and just tried to understand and like listen. And Katie, even like how you with that with your roommate, you were on her team, even though that was like a really, really, morbid choice that you had to sort of make about the demise of her life that she put in your hands, sort of, and like, wanted you to ride along with her on that journey. But that might have been what made her stay, was because she said, oh, like somebody doesn't think I'm crazy, or somebody isn't
Yeah.
like, doesn't push me out because I'm struggling. Like she embraced me, and so maybe she didn't give you credit for that, but like when you were telling me that, I was like, I bet it was your acceptance of her and her choice that made her want to stay. And again, I'm like being brought to tears by it, but like I just want to thank you both too for, sharing vulnerable moments. And I'd love to dedicate this show to your friends. It's so sad that they're not here, but you two are doing justice by being their voice and like sharing the positive things about them that maybe society didn't get to see because they saw the struggles and the trauma and the addictions, and you guys are sharing the beautiful things about them, and the things that we should all be looking for in each other. So I just want to thank you both. And, it's really interesting hearing about centers like that. Like I always wonder like where else things like this could be taking place. And so this was another piece of that puzzle. We talk about how gifted programs are in school. This is almost like a gifted program for adults, like
Yeah.
They're freaking out, like the neurodivergent people that break out of, and start to remember the things that like these gate kids forgot, and remembering who they are. And then they're like, oh, like let's bring them back and like, figure the experiment on the developed brain now. They're not kids anymore. Like let's experience and, experiment on that. So I appreciate you guys sharing that, because that also is probably something that other people have dealt with and like aren't confident enough to share and probably feel isolated. And I just want to honor you two for your courage to come on here and share about all of this. You two are both brilliant and beautiful, and like I said, it's really incredible to just even imagine both of you being in like those dark places, because you're so bright now. You're now like handing off the torch that was given to you to other people. And the same people that gave you guys a torch whenever the world was black, you're now illuminating the world and lighting other people's candles, which is really, really special. So I wanted to give you two the opportunity. You both have an online presence. So I wanted you to both share where people can connect with you, where you're at online, because I know there's probably a lot of people that would want to follow you and keep in touch and, follow your journeys as you guys light up the world.
Right on. Well, I'm on TikTok right now, and I kind of like that as my main like place to interact, even though I also got on X recently, Twitter X. You can find me there. Those are like the two main like social medias that I'm using now to talk to people. Oh gosh. Yeah, you can tell whenever I make a video, I don't plan, I just kind of shoot. But like but I'm going to start creating content. I've been really thinking about what it is that I want to create, and the content that I'm going to be sharing on TikTok, as long as we have ability to share, and other places, is going to be really about like bridging where we go from here, and like working with people who might be also like resonating with um like a dark night of the soul experience, and just helping provide like just a bridge for them to cross to the other side, because it does get better. And there's a lot of people who think they're targeted and gang stalked that I talk to that are from this particular platform that have reached out to me. And like, I just want to say, like, if you're one of them, like, don't worry, it's going to get better. It doesn't have to be dark and scary forever. A lot of it is like where we put our um like focus too. Like if you're very hyper focused on the dark stuff, you're going to attract more of that. So like I try to help us like bridge into a more empowered place over here on my social media. Um anyways.
And on TikTok, you can type in Kate Navi, or intuitive_intervention. And I'll have it linked below for you guys too. That way you guys can just go click on it. But if you're in the app right now, Kate.Navi and then intuitive_intervention. And then Katie's Twitter. And I'm so happy that you joined Twitter, because the community's getting pretty strong on there too for survivors and whistleblowers. It's at KD. So KATIE_Navi. So you guys can find her there too, and we'll have that linked. And then Daniel, what about you?
You can find me. I'm mostly on TikTok at it's Destiny Mindset, and I'm mostly on TikTok right now. I'm still, my content is basically I want to, uplift and encourage people, and just be a light in this present darkness and point to the truth that set me free, and be able to, you know, relate with people on their journey, no matter where they're at, what side they're on. It doesn't matter. But I want people to humor me, and to maybe, take some of my advice through my experience, and put it to the test, and see what happens, or how it might change their life, just, for a brief moment of time, if they're willing to indulge in any other rabbit hole and go down it, go down another rabbit hole. And the pieces do all connect, and like we all do have a purpose. And like it says, that's my name, Destiny Mindset, to have a mindset of reaching your purpose and destiny, and fulfilling that, the reason why that we are here. And I'm also on YouTube. It's I'm not as much on YouTube, but it's the same thing in Destiny Mindset. I think it's Destiny _ mindset.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I don't have as much content on there, but I'm gonna start uploading some of my stuff from TikTok onto YouTube as well. And I I don't have I'm not active on Twitter or X right now, or Instagram, but I do have pages over there. But I'm not gonna. I still got to go through those and update them and get them up to current. So, but these are the two that I am on. So, and if anyone wants to reach out for anything at all, if I can help in some way, shape, or form, I will definitely extend whatever I can to them.
Yeah. Can I make one request? Please don't reach out to me if you're a guy, unless you just want to like be like pleasant and like a friend and follow me and like have normal conversations. But if you're a man and you are struggling with your story or your experience, please reach out to Daniel. I think men need to work with men, especially when it comes to unpacking trauma, and women need to work with women when it comes to unpacking trauma. And as much as I love all of you men so much, like I really do, and hold space for your stories, I don't feel equipped as a coach, as a woman, to like work with your trauma. So please reach out to Daniel or some other, maybe Emma might have some like suggestions for great guy coaches. But ladies, come on at me. Yeah.
Well, again, I want to thank you both for coming on. This is a really beautiful conversation. I love like these high level talks. And even though it was like a difficult conversation at times, this was actually like a very, very beautiful and uplifting conversation too, and we talked about a lot of things that definitely, definitely don't get talked about enough. And coming together and talking about it, we're helping destigmatize, sort of relabel and get people to think about, cause and effect versus just focusing on the effect, like how society wants us to, look at the end result of the person instead of the journey that got them there. It's like we always honor people when their journey leads to a success or something good. But when somebody's journey leads them to a really dark place, we kind of shut people off and judge them. So we're helping bring a light back and focus on what brings a person to become addicted or to have suicidal ideation. It's not them just choosing to do it just because they feel like it. Like there's a story behind everybody. There's a testimony behind everybody's struggles, and seeing you two here on the other side, like everybody has the opportunity. If we can all be compassionate enough as a society, we can have everybody feel confident enough that they can heal and be accepted into society, and that there's other choices other than
Yeah.
not being here, or having to be addicted, or be on a dark path their whole life. Like there is a light, and it starts with community and sharing our testimonies and helping each other realize that we're not alone. So I will have Katie and Daniel's information in the show notes, you guys. I highly encourage you to please go connect with them, go share their content. If you guys like the gifted and talented gate program, tag program talk, Katie's page has a lot of videos about that, which is really fun. I really like Katie's page too, because she kind of gets you thinking. She asks questions and is very inquisitive. And Daniel, I just started following you, so I'm really excited to dig into your content. And I know if it's anything like how you speak on, say, a podcast like this, I know it's going to be loaded with beautiful content that we can all learn from. And I'm so grateful that you're both choosing to use your voice. So I will have all of their pages below for you guys to go follow. I'll have all my information below to you. Feel free to reach out if you guys want to be on the podcast. Reach out to these guys, go support them. The algorithms don't really like us talking about this stuff, so your support really helps lift us up. So please go support these warriors. God bless you all. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.